Welcome to this meeting of the Merrimack School Board this Monday evening, January 5th, 2015. Happy New Year. Would you all rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. One quick note before we begin this evening. Board member Davis Powell is excused this evening, and I'll preemptively excuse student representative Kira Crowley. However, if she shows up, her tardiness is excused. So that takes us to item number 2 on tonight's agenda, approval of the December 15th, 2015 minutes. Is there a motion? Made by Mr. Schneider, seconded by Ms. Guagliumi. Are there any amendments? Mr. Schneider.
Yes, I have 3 fairly simple ones. First one's on the top of page 3, line 102. Should say board member Schneider suggested adding customization. We could have the anonymous board member, but what the heck. The next one's on page 5, line number 218. It's attorney Greg Michael, G-R-E-G, not Craig. And finally, on page 9, find page 9, line 448, it says Planning and Building Committee will provide a report to the school board on January 20th, not the 5th.
Thank you. Any others? Vice Chair Barnes.
Back to page 3, line 117, because you did get your own edit. You could be like the unknown comic, though, the unknown school board member, just like the 80s. And I'm stalling because my pages are sticking together. It's Chestnut Hill Developers, plural. And page 4. Line 180, we just want to have some clarifying language to say, continued when it was realized that the multiple representatives from the school district voted against the intersection. And that's all I have.
Great. Ms. Guagliumi.
On page 2, line 69, just for the sake of context, Dr. Paul LeBlanc, who's the president of SNUHU, for anyone that reads the notes, to put some context around who he is. And then I also, line 124 on page 3, again, more context. The Department of Public Works has concerns with the design of the proposed intersection. I would suggest something that that references Stephen Keach. So didn't the proposed intersection, that was a work product that we collaborated with him on, right?
Or perhaps the proposed intersection as a rotary would
yes,
clarify
that would be
what
fine. That would be fine. Yep. Or roundabout.
A roundabout.
Yep.
Even better.
Thank you. And then line 146 on page 3, the Department of Public Works determined that the intersection meets, plural, the requirement for a stop sign. Page 4, line 198. This was in regards to my comment, and it says she questioned the cost benefit of having a gated throughway intersection, and then I recall referencing the safety concerns, so particularly for the safety of citizens and children.
Okay.
And then page 7, line 321, it says Director Tussaud explained that the roof repair and the HVAC unit are 2 separate projects unrelated to each other. and I just a little more to add. He stated it's hard to know if the project will cost a little bit more at a later year, but again, he reiterated that they are unrelated projects. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe most of mine were caught already, but I do have a couple of others. On page 1, line 45, I think it would be good to, since everyone we're talking about in this paragraph are educators, if we could insert the word Merrimack before educators, Jill Solano, Deb Belanger, Ann Graves, etc. Page 2, line 63, just a grammatical fix at the end. She was proud of the entire cohort, if we could insert the word the. This page is good. Page 4, line 197, again, just grammatical. Board member Gualiumi acknowledged the desire by everyone. Past tense. Page 5, line 222, if we could add a clarifying sentence that says, to that end, he committed to having a traffic study done in the next 2 weeks, referencing Attorney Greg Michael. I have a question about this one. I'm a little embarrassed not to know, but on page 6, line 298, I believe the correct spelling of Axle is A-X-L-E? It is. Okay. The other way, it's the ice cream place, right? Okay. And then I think that's it. And that's all that I had. So that being the case, we will put the minutes to a vote. All those in favor of approving the December 15th, 2015 minutes as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 4-0-0. And that takes us to item number 3 on tonight's agenda, public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board. All we ask is that you go to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone looking to address the board under public participation? Seeing none, we'll close public participation and move to item 4, acceptance of gifts and grants under $5,000. Business Administrator Chevenel.
Thank you very much. This evening we have 5 for your consideration. The first is to Merrimack High School from the Rotary Club of Merrimack. It is in the amount of $1,118.97. It is in support of the first team, number 166 at Merrimack High School. The second is from the Health Trust, Inc. It is a $100 gift received by the Healthcare Cost Containment Committee, a committee that was formed to look at various ways that we can contain our costs in the future for the price of health insurance, and will be used for expenses related to communication with retirees regarding healthcare cost containment efforts. It's a group I don't believe was reached out to in the past, so this will be some public relations kind of initiative towards them. The next we have is Shaw's Supermarket. This is the Mastercola Elementary School. It's part of our We Love Our Schools program. They invest a portion of proceeds towards the school of the person's, the shopper's choice. And so they have a gift of $400 to be used for educational supplies and materials, etc. Next, we have to Thornton's Ferry from Barnes & Noble, and I have to make it to one of these events one of these days, in the amount of $300.53. The staff at Thornton's Ferry conducts a principals night at Barnes & Noble where they read and act out books to the children who were there in the store. Some of the theater has been quite excellent, I hear, from those who have done it in the past. With costumes also. And last but not least, we have to the Merrimack School District, a gift from Wentworth Association, 100 Coventry Court, Merrimack, New Hampshire, in the amount of $159. This is to assist the needs of the students in the district who are considered homeless throughout the district and do not have a permanent place to hang their hat in the evening. And that's the gifts and grants portion.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Vice Chair Barnes.
I move we accept the gift from the multiple organizations with our gratitude.
And a second, made by Ms. Guagliumi. All those in favor of accepting the multiple gifts with our gratitude signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. That motion carries 4-0-0. And that takes us now to item number 5 on tonight's agenda, the 2013-2014 New Hampshire Parent Involvement Survey in Special Education. I would invite to the table Director of Special Education, Mr. John Fabrizio, and from our parent support group, Ms. Barbara Publicover and Ms. Tricia Swanger. Welcome to you all, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good evening and Happy New Year to all of you, too.
And to you.
So tonight I just would like to mention Michelle Watson, who's not with us tonight. She's home ill, but I wanted to just mention her, and she's been a wonderful part of our team here that's worked together to really both look at the survey each year and then move forward and develop programming based on our results and trying to be responsive to the needs that are presented from the survey. So put this together today, a few talking points. This is going to be kind of a two-part series because it's there's been some changes to the survey that you'll see as we go through it, and I want to talk about tonight a little overview of what the survey is, what the statewide results are, our response rate that we had this year, and then the changes in the survey, which I'm very lucky to have both Barbara and Trish with me because they know this very well, and they were able to explain it to me, and I believe if I was able to get it, I believe all of you will also. And then the types of questions that were asked to parents this year. So that's sort of our little agenda for this evening. So parent involvement survey. What is it and why do we have it? It all starts with the federal government and the Department of Education at the federal level. And then each is one of the requirements for the state as part of their plan is they have to submit every year the results of how they've gone out to parents and reached out to parents to see what services are available for their students in special ed. So the Department of the involvement survey from the Department of Special Ed goes out in the spring to all parents who have parents of children with IEPs. And they learn more about how the school district is involving families and their child in special education. The survey is done each year to meet all those requirements, and it's also done more importantly to help us improve the education we have for the families.
Guess I'm up. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the history first, yes? So I serve on the committee that created the survey and continues to monitor the survey. We are a committee consisting of various stakeholders in the state, and in conjunction with Measurement Incorporated, we designed a survey for our state. As of this year, the state is contracted with Gibson Consulting Group to help continue support the survey technically and with the logistical administration of the survey throughout the state. I've served on the committee since its inception in 2007. I just love driving to Concord. We continue to meet on a regular basis in order to review feedback from each survey as they come back, and to advise the Department of Education at the state level on how to improve administration of the survey, as well as how to help or best help districts improve their results. And I'm going to go on to discuss a little bit about our response rate here in Merrimack. So you've heard this before, but just to review, this is a general distribution survey. For a survey of this type, in order to be statistically significant, in other words, in order for the results that you get back to be considered something that is valid, you need a response rate of 15%. Our response rate in Merrimack, I will give you for this year, was an overall of 36.5%. That consists of a preschool survey response rate of 46.5%, and then a school-aged response rate of 35.6%. By comparison, the state response rate for this year was 19.0%, and that was actually an improvement in the state's response rate as well. Our response rates last year were combined 28%, with school age being 27% and preschool being 40%. Just one note of interest that you might want to notice as you're looking here is it is common and that throughout the state the response rate is generally higher for preschool surveys rather than school age surveys. But we're still working on that. So now I'm going to hand it over to you.
This year, as Tricia said, the state engaged a new contract with Gibson Consulting.
Excuse me, Ms. Publicover.
Sorry about that.
Perfect, thank you.
I saw green, but it wasn't green enough, I guess. As Tricia said, this year, the Department of Ed contracted with a new provider, and that's Gibson Consulting out of Texas. And a change was made to how the survey was going to be sent, the results were going to be sent out to districts. In the previous 6 years, we had always reported on a percentage basis. So X amount of surveys sent, X amount of surveys received, X amount of people thought this, that, or the other. Since inception, though, all those questions have always had a weighted value, what's called a scaled score. And back in the early days, it just, it seemed like not quite the right thing to do to throw that kind of stuff out on districts. Percentages were a much, much easier way of getting information across, and they gave us a lot of information. But the new provider has really shown us that by looking at your scaled scores and the difficulty of questions, it really gets you to look far deeper into what your parents are saying and what your district's doing. And districts can even peel down even deeper if they want to. But what these questions do, and they're the same questions we've had for 7 years, so we haven't changed the playing field at all. All we're doing now is reporting the way, in theory, it was intended sort of to be reported 7 years ago. And of these 25 questions on both preschool and school age, and they're different on each one based upon school age. You can't ask quite the same questions that you would ask on the preschool. Those questions have sort of like a low, medium, high kind of value to them. So down, and they're all mixed in, so it's not like, a parent can go and know, oh, if I answer question number 3, that's an easy one, but if I answer question number 25, it's hard. It's mixed. And it was done that way for a reason, and Tricia, if you wanted, she could tell you, the reasonings behind that when they set it up. But these questions are all weighted such that a district can see, what's easy for us to do? Is it easy for me to hand a piece of paper? Is it easy for me to say hello? Is it easy for me to really get engaged with a family and get them resources, talk to them about what's going on, what's in that IEP, how can I help, what's going on? So that by looking at the scaled scores this year versus percentages, what it does is it really gives us a bar, a benchmark, a threshold to really look at, to start to say, where are we? We've always looked at our percentages, But, you know, like most people, you tend to look at the ones that are like, well, I'm really good at those, so I'm not going to look at those. And the ones that are low, well, maybe I'll put some effort on those. What this does is it gives you a way to look at all of it, to say, the things that I'm doing really, really well on, I don't want to forget about those. I want to really continue to knock those home. Then there's sort of this group that's, yeah, maybe I'm not quite there, but, you know, I'm pretty close, and I want to continue to hammer away at those. And then there's ones that are, not say they're unreachable, but I would say the top 5 are the top 5 across the state, that every single district, every single parent will have a hard time saying that that's, you know, that's reachable, so to speak. And it's because it is. It requires effort, it requires time, it requires resources, it requires all those things. So what this really has done is sort of taken the, okay, we got 72% last year and we went to 80%. Well, that's good. No, now it really makes us look right there and say, where are we? And how can we move that? And knowing that even with all the efforts that we're going to put in, you know, those lines don't go like this. They're going to move, they're going to inch up, but they're going to inch up. But the nice thing about the way these scaled scores are is that we're not going to forget about those things that we do well. Because I think that's where, it's my own opinion, having looked at many of the districts around the state, is that's what people tend to forget about. They sit there and say, I had 30% of my parents respond, I got a 50% rating that said my district, you know, I feel good about it being involved in facilitating in my district, and I don't have to do anything else. Well, then all of a sudden, the bar starts sliding and the percentages start sliding. And that's where I think this is a much clearer picture, and one that, you know, I think we're going to really do some great things with, and I hope other districts around the state do too.
So an example of some of the questions that Bob talked about. Some of the higher level, more difficult questions are, for example, the highest one: people from preschool special education connect families with others from other support. Very hard to do. Connecting preschool families to other families. We've tried. We've done things in different programs. We've tried online. We're doing that. It's a continual effort. But that's a very hard aspect to reach. Very hard one to reach because people from preschool connecting with each other. They're there a limited time, 2 days a week sometimes, 3 days a week for 2.5 hours. In their cars, they drop kids off, they pick kids up, they leave. There's not a lot of that community connection with, for say, like a 5th or 6th grader who's there with multiple programs at night, multiple things happening. Harder thing to do. We have to look to different kind of medias to make that happen. Online resources, forums, websites, things like that we're helping to connect. And we're working on some of those things. But that's an example of a very hard one to reach. Then we have more of our medium level things. People from our preschool and special education offer parents different ways to communicate with people from preschool special education. Face-to-face, meetings, notes, phone calls. That's a medium one, like we said. We're reaching that. We're doing that. That higher level, though, of making them connect and stay together is harder. This is more of a mid-level. Can we present information? Can we give it to them? Yes, we've done that. And parents are pretty comfortable that we've given them information. And then some lower level things. People from the preschool special education are available to speak to me. Yes, we're there. And we can speak to them. And that's pretty straightforward that we can accomplish that. So it's a lower level question that the majority of districts around the state should be okay with that one, that we're able to speak to people when we call. And we're hoping that that's okay. Now we get to the school age survey. Now school age is a little different. My school offers parent training about special education issues. Multiple different disabilities, multiple different issues. We're starting. We've brought in some programs. We're trying to keep doing that. That's a difficult one to do, to reach all of our families, you know, over 600 families to reach, to try to do that. It's a difficult one, but we're working on it. It's a high level of difficulty. Medium question. I was given all reports and evaluations related to my child prior to the IEP meeting. Again, that's been a district-wide goal for about 2 or 3 years now, that we're trying to 5 days prior have IEPs ready and have reports ready for parents, so they're able to read them, review them. Like all of us, when we come to a meeting, we want to be prepared. We're trying to do that for our families. It's a district-wide effort. We're hoping we did pretty well when we see that score. And then some lower level. I was given information about my rights as a parent and child who was eligible for special education. As Barbara said earlier, they were handed a book when they walked in. Yes, they were given to a lower level. We can accomplish that. We should all accomplish that. So different levels of questions. So before we move on to sort of our next steps, I want to talk a little about some of the things we've done so far this year to try to meet the needs of our families in response to last year's survey, and then kind of what do we have on the plan for the rest of this year.
I'll try to do it right this time. Over the last, what I did was go back over what the parent group has done over the last year and a half here, and actually tried to connect it, because we look at all these questions and we say, what do we want to do? And really relating them to the questions and how tough they are, and where we're, whether we're trying to hit both preschool, school age, et cetera. So a year ago, we had, I'm going to get her name wrong, from Reed's Ferry, who did a presentation on applied behavioral analysis. And that was mainly driven by the preschool people wanting to get more information on how their children were being taught, the kinds of interventions, things of that nature. From there, we went into having Dr. McLaughlin do a presentation on understanding standards-based curriculum. Again, families wanted to know, what's the methods, what's the instruction, what's the information and theories behind why my kids are being taught the way they're supposed to be. In March of 2014, we put on a summer resource fair, so to speak, where we had a variety of people from the community, karate people, the Parks and Rec people, Civil Air Patrol, a variety of people coming in to just, again, one of the things parents are saying to us is that, we want resources. What are we going to do with our kids during the summer? What are we going to do with them after school? What can we do to get them involved, social activities, things of that nature? May took us a little bit, had nothing to do with the parent involvement survey, but it did at the same time. We did 6 para education appreciation events, and even though they weren't specifically related to the survey, for us it really is, because it's all about supporting our kids and how can we get parents to really know that we're all in this together. In September, Mr. Fabrizio and Lisa Frenette came to our meeting and talked about what was going on in the district as far as focused monitoring, all the various things that are going on with the compliance issues, the compliance events that are going on. Lisa gave us an entire background of what's going on at the high school, various changes that have gone on, and that was amazing. Again, someone who's been in the district for a long time, I didn't even know half of the things that were going on up there, because again, if your child isn't in one of those particular programs, you don't know about it. So it was really, really great, and I would say 99% of these items are either we have the PowerPoints and handouts up on our website, or the tape is on our website. And then in October, our big event where we had Lynn Lyons come in and talk about anxiety. Again, can you specifically relate it to an item? Yeah, mostly it's about trying to help me get information to help my kid. Is it specifically special ed? Sometimes we don't run them specifically for special ed. We're called a special ed parent support group, but it's really all about supporting all the children. So, you'll see a lot of our ones, whether it's the standards-based curriculum, whether it's the high school overview, anxiety events, they're really about everybody. So, and in addition to that, we run what we did in line with preschool parents talking to us about how, they want to connect, but they don't have time to connect. That 1 hour that they drop, or 2 hours they drop their kid off, they're going to, the grocery store, they're going for a cup of coffee. They don't want, they want it, but they also, have other commitments. We started in February of last year, starting to put out a newsletter. We try to do it like every couple of months, and in it we really try to mix it up so that there's things for preschool, there's things for middle schoolers, stuff in general for anybody, but realizing that we can't necessarily get them to us, but we can get to them. And then just our meetings, our websites, a lot of information we get out via email, whether it's us holding a special ed training, our sister organizations over in Nashua, Pelham, Londonderry, we all try to talk to each other, and like, we're running anxiety, don't you run anxiety, why don't you run something else? And then we all just feed off each other and try to send each other to the various groups. So, those are some of the things we've done based upon looking at the survey and what has come out of also our parent meetings. So.
And just a plug, on March 17th, we will be having Jen Lowton, who is a Google Apps trainer and also a certified special educator will be coming in to do sort of an hour-long workshop on what good apps are out there to help students and students with disabilities. So that's coming up on March 17th. So just a little quick plug. And then finally, to continue our conversation in 2015, we will come back again and overview the parent involvement survey and our scores and kind of how we did and our overall scale scored. And then how to sustain the positive areas we are working on, and then what are our future plans to address the more difficult areas, and then kind of questions on next steps. That's kind of the next piece, because a lot tonight for one piece to understand all the changes and then go into what our results are. So we'll hold that for another time. Is there any questions that we can answer preliminary?
I'm sure there are. Vice Chair Barnes.
You brought up one of the initiatives that you're developing regarding trying to collaborate amongst preschool parents, and that is having an online presence. An online, sounds like an online place for them to go and collaborate and exchange. And my question is, how do you deal with, student identity issues and privacy issues?
Basically, it's really in the beginning stages of doing something like that. We haven't started with like an all-out, any kind of social media page or anything like that. It's more about connecting them to the parent group and the parent website, and then getting permission. Barbara and Tricia are wonderful with asking parents, saying, can I refer your name to someone or talk to someone or do anything like that. So it's more of that personal one-to-one connection that happens, basically facilitated through our parent support group members.
Okay, thank you.
Shannon, if I could build off that, and we also get referrals in from the district saying to us, I have a parent who would like to connect with somebody,
right,
or has some questions, would you be willing, someone in your group be willing? Then we work back to the district, say yes, they then hook, so it's always the anonymity, but it's always coming from the other side, from that parent requesting that information. So we do support in that way. And many of the things that like Sheila Demers will do, a lot of handouts and flyers that she sends home, she then sends them over to us, and we try to get them either up on the website, out to in the emails, because maybe, the parent lost that one, and so they'll get again, it's better to have two. So, we're trying to support it in that way, but.
Gotcha. And my other question was regarding long-term goals for the parent group, because it sounds like the parent group is really the anchor that has been a great facilitator for information and for parents navigating the district, from that perspective, because obviously it's, the seat they sit in. But what's the long-term plan, I think, for succession planning? Because I know you have high schoolers. So, are you fostering a farm team, I guess I should say?
Yes, we are. Yeah, we're always fostering a farm team. But right, you're right. I mean, Tricia and I do not have any children in the district that are in a special ed right now. Michelle Watson is still involved in that piece of the puzzle. Again, we're trying to constantly, mentor and bring people on. It's hard, it's absolutely hard, because certainly you'd like to get somebody in the lower years so that they have time, as we did, to come through it all. But again, that takes a lot of you know, they've had going through the just sort of like the whole learning curve of it all. And we try to do that, but we also know that, you know, it takes, you know, it takes special people, but everybody can do a little bit, you know, and so if it has to be as it is right now, like, you know, leading by committee, well, that's what we'll do. I mean, you know, certainly, I would say certainly if it ever came to the point where we thought that it wasn't having any value, we would certainly, you know, probably close it down. But I see none of that. We are the oldest one in the state. We continue to, just when we think, you know, attendance is waning, all of a sudden, boom, it comes out of nowhere. Just in December, I mean, I didn't happen to go, but you folks had just a get-together. Didn't have a meeting per se, just had a get-together with some snacks and whatever. Very well attended. I mean, who would have thought? I think it was like a week before Christmas. But it's like, you know, the need is there at certain times, and you don't know when that time is. So you just have to be there. So our succession plan is we just have one going all the time. We don't have anything, but we're not going to let people down.
Thanks.
But yeah, I actually was in attendance at the December get-together, and I think we had about a dozen people in and out. One thing Barb didn't mention is, although it started with Barb, and then somehow I came on board, and then somehow Michelle came on board. So we've actually been growing a little bit, but there are always new people. One thing I found, because I've been in the district for a while, we won't say how long, but I've had children go all the way through the district, and I've volunteered for, you know, the PFA and the PTTG, and for other things around playground committees and different things. And there's one thing that I found is universal among any volunteer organization, and that is you're always looking for the next step and the next people to bring folks up, and we're no different in that regard. I think one thing we have that makes it a little more difficult for us is the fact that there is a little bit more to learn in order to live in this world. So it takes a little more time, a little more effort for people to get to that point where they can kind of help guide the organization. On the other hand, one thing that I have found, at least with our group versus many others that I've served with, is that we have a pretty broad base of people that don't necessarily run the organization, but people that Barb or Michelle or I or anybody in the group really can tap into to get information in certain areas, whether it be certain age levels, certain disability areas, or different things that are going on in the community. And actually the folks that we have been wonderful. Barb can tell you, you know, if we have a parent comes to us with a question and says, God, I just moved to the area and I don't know where to go for summer camps. I'm at a loss. What do you do up here? You know, Barb can perhaps say, we have someone is looking for information on summer camps, and anybody can chime in on that, and we'll get 5, 10, 20 responses in a 24-hour period. So that's one of the real good things about our group that makes us stronger. So it's not just us.
Just following up on that, absolutely. I mean, we sort of like, you know, push the paper and push the website, but, you know, and in theory run the meeting, but really, like Tricia said, I mean, at any point in time, I can throw an email out to the group to say, I have a parent who needs this, or I have a parent who's asking this, and boom, it's incredible. That's the leadership. You know, are they sitting here tonight? Not necessarily, but, you know, I'll take that any day. You know, compared to, I can tell you, as a person who helps helps go to mentor these parent groups around the state, that's where many of them are lacking, is that they may have leadership, but they just don't have that depth underneath that they can draw on. So.
You're good.
And just,
I'm
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Just to
Mr.
add
Fabrizio.
To
Please.
as a piece too is it's about partnership too, and I think that I'm a representative of the other coordinators too, and it's the fact that they all do attend these meetings, and monthly we rotate them, and it's on their time. They go in the evening, they answer questions, they make themselves available, and they also put out the information about the group, and when they're having a difficult situation with a parent, they refer them to Barb and Trish to try to help mediate some of those pieces. So it's almost like our own internal catch basin and network to help our parents and support our parents who are having difficulty even with us internally.
That's great. Thank you. Ms. Guayumi.
First, I'd like to say thank you for all of the work that you do in volunteer work in the district and the support of parents and the community. I had just a couple questions. One was relating the survey percentages. So you had said that it had increased maybe 6 or 7% from last year to this year. Has that trend over the last few years continued to increase, or is it kind of up and down?
Okay, I can field this one. Our district, like many districts, and what you often see with surveys like this, is now that we are in our 7th year of administration, after the first 3 years about, you tend to run up against what they call survey fatigue, because this is the same survey that goes out to parents every year. And so oftentimes people will just say, you know, I've done that. I've been there, I've done that. I'm not going to bother this year. They know. And it's something that you have to kind of battle against in order to get good feedback. One thing that we try to do in our group, as well as throughout the district, is, explain to folks and try and make sure that they understand and that they are aware that it is important that we get good feedback from people. And the more people we hear back from, the higher our percentages of our response rate, the better information we are getting, the more accurate the information that we are getting. So it's something that we've focused on, and John can tell you, and as being on the state committee, we did have recommendations for districts to try and improve their response rate when things started to wane. And I'm very proud to say it has worked very well in our district, and our parents have really kind of made the effort, because it does get tiresome. It's very easy to say, it's just another piece of paper. But it's very important for parents throughout the district and throughout the state to understand that we do sit down and look at this with a fine-tooth comb. And this drives what we do to improve and better serve the children in the district. And I think that's helped. So we did have a bit of a dip after about year 3. I think we leveled off a bit, if you remember, around 4. Mm-hmm. And then we worked, and we've been ticking our way back up. So keep your fingers crossed. We'll keep working.
And then I had a question regarding, it was the anxiety seminar. And I know you had invited the board to that, and I had meant to go actually and got waylaid at work. But I did wonder if that was online. Is that available? Had that been running through Merrimack TV?
I do not know if it's still on. Normally she would not be videotaped because we pay her, and it's something that you don't want to take away from her income. She did agree to let us run it for 3 months. So we ran it for October, November, and December on the community channel, on the educational channel, excuse me. So as far as I know, our contract with her was up at December 31st. But we wanted to do that because we just felt that we couldn't get to everybody, and as it was, we had over 200 people come. And, there's just not enough room to put all that. So for the many people, like maybe preschool parents who couldn't get there because, they got to get the kids to bed at night, she did allow us to do that. So we were extremely, extremely grateful for that. But I do not believe it's still on.
Okay, so in that case, I have positive feedback that I received. Someone had explained something that they saw that was just amazing and really incredible online on Merrimack TV, and that was what I figured it. She couldn't remember who was speaking, and she was describing it a little bit to me. And anyway, she had given me positive feedback regarding that presentation.
If it was a very enthusiastic lady, then yes, it was Lynn
Yeah,
Lyons.
she said she was phenomenal and very interesting to listen to. But she said she never saw the whole thing because every 3 different times she turned on and got like part of it, and then a little bit more, and that kind of thing. So thank you.
Mr. Schneider.
So for me, this report, the interesting dimension is the scale and the different levels of questions, which is sort of new because I've seen this, look at the survey results. And I'm going to stumble through this question, so bear with me for a second. You talk about the parent groups in the surrounding, areas that you work with. But then we talk about the questions that are asked around all the districts in the state to parents. When you look at the ones that are the more difficult, the harder to get through the knothole questions, aside from working with other parent groups that you have relationships with, are there ever opportunities to work with other districts in the state to see what ideas they've come up with in these, to see? Because when I hear the parent group, I think of more of a regional aspect, but yet we're talking about something that's statewide here. Okay.
And the answer is yes, we do. Very often, frequently, and from the very beginning. And the state helps to lead that, and that's part of what the committee does. We have representatives and get feedback, not only, actually, because many districts don't have parent groups that they can tap into, we're kind of a new outlier area for that, but we're becoming a leader in that area because it's really helped and made things more efficient for districts that do have parent groups to reach out and make that connection. But the state DOE and our committee actually does look and get feedback from districts, all the districts throughout the state, to get feedback on what they have done to improve, what they think they might want to do to improve. And that information is shared throughout the state with all districts and all administrators. So yes, that is something that is ongoing.
One of the things that I didn't include everything I got from the state in the packet. I gave you a piece of for now, but one of the things in there was some best practices, and it came with part of the packet that was there. And one of I was asked probably a couple of years ago now, year and a half ago, to respond to a survey from the state about because of our return and what we did well and the whole thing. So they do take that feedback. And one of the things that came out of it that we've done differently that I think has helped is I've been doing the last 2 years now kind of a state of the state address on where we are each year and using the opportunity to introduce the survey and talk about past practices that have been helpful and where we are in special ed and where's kind of our vision we're going, and trying to use that opportunity to write to the parents along with the survey to try to talk about some of the positive things. And that seemed to have a very positive effect, and it's come back pretty well received from parents about how they like to hear about what's going on from a kind of a district overview point of view.
Yeah, and I would imagine that now that you have the scale, so you've got the ones that are more difficult, you can focus in maybe on the ones that are harder where creativity in another district might be a benefit. But that was, I mean, I've seen a lot of the input over the years, the survey, the results of what you guys do, both in the district and the parent group. So, but for me, the real interesting part was the scale approach this time to help maybe focus in on some of the harder ones, because I know, some of the hard preschool ones. I mean, it's been eons since I've been in the preschool aspect of this, but some of those things, if you could find a way to crack some of those open, it would really be breakthrough, because, in daycare, you're in private daycare, just understanding the resources that are available to everybody in town and what they can take advantage of, and even outside the district, is really a huge benefit. So,
All set. I too, like Ms. Gualiumi, got waylaid at work the evening of the anxiety seminar, but was fortunate enough to DVR it and actually still have it on my DVR in case your friend is looking to view it. We can have a viewing party at my home some evening and watch it. But it really was something to see. I wanted to ask a question, and I'm actually going to probably put Mr. Fabrizio's hypothesis to the test here, that if you could explain it to him, you can explain it to me. As you were going through the scale scores, we talked about the different scales and the item's position on the scale having to do with its difficulty to implement. Yet when I read the deck, and it may just be a correlation thing, it says items with lower values are easier to agree with. So it's not so much in the context of us as a district, but more in terms of the survey respondent, their ability to agree with something, right? Kind of like, okay, this question is motherhood and apple pie, and yes, I can agree with it. Or this one's a little fuzzier, I'm not sure I can agree with it. But what I heard in our discussion was that the questions are related to what are more difficult to implement. So I was wondering if you could talk about that relationship, chicken or the egg, causality, all of that.
Okay. So I want to make sure I make this very clear because there is a good way to explain it, and I want to do it in the proper order for you. First, before I begin, just let me set things up for you and explain that. First of all, again, none of the questions have changed. The questions have been the same all 7 years, and it is our intention that the questions will remain the same until someone shows us an incredibly good reason to change anything.
Right.
Part of the reason for that is you want to be able to see progression and improvement. And if you change the question, then you cannot correlate the results from one year to the next, so you do not know if you are doing better or worse. So the questions were always the same. Second point, when we designed this survey, it was always designed with this behind it. This was always in existence. You just didn't see it. The reason for that, you're seeing right now. Part of the fear and the trepidation was we didn't want to put too much out, too steep a hill to climb right from the beginning. And percentages are much easier for everyone to kind of understand and get a feel for. The other thing is it gave the committee and the state the opportunity to take those percentages and double check to see the correlation with the difficulty level. And in fact, what we have seen is a very direct correlation. So it proves that the scale is valid that we're using. With me so far?
Yes.
Okay, good. So there's that. Now, the scale itself. The best way I can think of to describe this scale is it is a mastery level. It builds on itself. So rather than considering responses, the reason it would be easier to respond to the first question is because it's a single action, simple yes or no. When things get more complicated, it is more difficult to determine yes or no. But all questions must be yes or no. So that's the basic answer.
Got it.
The reason there is the difficulty and the difficulty levels you are seeing is the difference, say, in swimming lessons or in mathematics. When you begin, you must be able to add first. If you cannot add, understanding the concept of multiplication and then division will be very difficult to achieve. And I can't remember exactly which question it is, but there are one or two questions in there that are actually federal requirements. So that is a very base. If you're not meeting the federal requirements, there's no way you're going to be able to meet anything above that. You need to be able to float before you can do the butterfly. And that's the way it's designed.
Perfect explanation. Your hypothesis was correct, Mr. Fabrizio. I look forward to seeing how our results look, in particular in this model, and more importantly, what types of insights we can derive through this new way of looking at them. And the board, I'm sure, at that time, as always, will ask what we can do to be in support. I would echo the sentiments around this table for the thanks to the parent support group, and in particular the two of you who are here tonight. Vice Chair Barnes talked about succession planning, and I very much liked the answer that you gave. And I think that it hit on something that I've at least said a number of times, that when it comes to volunteering, the 80-20 rule applies, that the 20% of the people are doing 80% of the volunteering. And I think the two ladies who are sitting here tonight are examples of that. This isn't the only thing you do here in town, and please know that it's appreciated by the board, by the staff, and the reason that our parent support group not only was the first, but I think is the model in the state is because of the two of you. So thank you very much. And that's going to take us to item number 6. Before we jump into item number 6, I'd just like to remind folks the next few budget items or the next few agenda items are related to the budgeting process. And I just wanted to review with folks what the calendar of events looks like as it relates to budget hearings. As you may know, we've already had a board meeting where we discussed food service and maintenance. Tonight we'll be talking about the upper elementary school, the library, technology, and media services, and the special services department budgets. On Wednesday of this week, January 7th, here in Town Hall at 7:30, we will have a board budget hearing, and we will review the 3 elementary schools, Mastrocola, Reeds, and Thornton's Ferry, the middle school, the high school, where we'll also have discussion related to the track. So we will have Mr. John Snell, who's responsible for the team, and Mr. Eric Sabian, because there were some outstanding questions about holding meets and what to do about the track, and then we'll talk about the district-wide budget. Then on Monday, January 12th, we won't be here. We'll be in the high school cafeteria because this room is previously booked. At 7:30, we'll have another board budget hearing. If we need additional meetings with any of the departments, they will be there. We'll have a discussion of the warrants, and the board will act on the budget and move the budget forward for approval, at which point it goes to the budget committee. The 2 sets of hearings that have been set up for the budget committee, one is on Tuesday, January 13th. That will also be at the high school, but start at 7 p.m. And the items on the agenda for that meeting are the 3 elementary schools I previously mentioned, the middle school, the high school, and special services. And then on January 27th, also a Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the high school cafeteria, the budget committee will take up food service, James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School, technology, library, and media services, maintenance, and the district-wide budget. So just wanted to remind folks, lots of opportunities to talk about the various items that we're going to discuss. And with that, we will begin the first of those next few items. Item number 6, formal hearing on the James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School's budget for 2015-2016. I'll invite to the table Principal Marcia McGill and Assistant Principal Mr. Bill Morris. Good evening, welcome.
I'd like to start this evening by sharing with you that we developed the 2014 or the 2015-2016 budget to provide students and staff with the resources that are needed to implement the programs that are designed at the grade 5 and 6 level, the upper elementary level. Factor significant in this budget, we continue to purchase the texts and instructional resources at a variety of reading levels for reading instruction. Additionally, in this area, we provide the materials and resources necessary for writing across the curriculum. Another factor, we continue to purchase the materials necessary to implement our standards-based math program. Within this, we also continue to purchase those handheld or manipulative type items for students, as well as any of the other resources that students need. Also a factor in our budget would be our continual replacement of furniture to provide those instructional programs for students. At this time, I'd like to address some of the questions that were presented to us, and if you don't mind, I'd like to cover those at this time. We had a question that came to us in reference to our police detail, asking that if that's an area that we've continually put the emphasis on our election days. And no, typically our police budget has been for activities that we have in the evening. For example, our arts festival at the end of the school year. But with our security and our concerns about security and our need to move our drop off and or pick up at the school, we feel that there's a need to put more of that emphasis for our police detail on those activities for students, to make it safe for students to enter and exit the building, whether it be by bus or by car or walking. Another question that was presented was in reference to a couple items talking about our science equipment replacement or science equipment repair. We do repair science equipment on an alternating basis. 1 year we'll repair and clean all of our balances that are used in the fifth grade science, and then the next summer we will do the cleaning and repair work on all of our microscopes. So in the 15-16 budget, that will be microscopes. They are a more sensitive piece of equipment, so that will be a little more expensive. Again, depending on what the need is on a particular year, if there's more repair that needs to be done, that price is going to change. Some years it costs us $375. Some years as much as $500. Last year it happened to cost us, on the balance is about $175. But I would expect on the microscopes, because they haven't been cleaned or worked on in 2 years, that would cost us. That's why we have that $500 in the budget. Another area where we had some questions was in reference to our social science, which is social studies field trips. Our fifth grade students go to the Independence Museum in Exeter at the end of the year as a culminating activity on colonial life and colonial America. And our sixth grade travels to Enterprise City in Dover for the economics component of our social studies curriculum. So those two items are there. Transportation is up, so the cost of that has gone up a little bit there. Another question we had was in reference to the furniture, and I'll explain that a little bit more. We have been replacing or providing for students in all of our classrooms and special education classrooms kidney tables. They're more conducive to reading instruction for small group guided reading. So we've been trying to replace tables, old, poor condition rectangular tables, with that more conducive kidney table for teachers. We've just about done that, because you've seen this in the budget for multiple years. We have a need for 5 more in our building at this time, so that's one area. Another set of tables last year, if you remember the budget, we bought 4 tables for our gifted and talented program. We had tables that were quite bowed and in pretty poor condition, so we replaced 4. We wanted 6 total, so we had 2 of them this year in the budget for that. As far as for bookcases, many years ago, we really emphasized with teachers the need for a pretty extensive leveled library within your classroom for students to always have books at their fingertips. And as a result, we've really encouraged teachers to have a really well-developed library. And we have a lot of bookcases that we adopted 11 years ago when our building was, first came about in 2004. So some of those bookcases are in pretty tough shape, or one of the shelves will break, or the side will start to fall apart. So we've been gradually trying to replace those so that we can maintain those classroom libraries. And if you walk through our building and visit, you'll see kids when they're doing their independent reading for a purpose, how close they are and around those bookcases, how important those books are to them. So we've been trying to replace those. So, with that said, if you have some questions, we'll
Great.
try to answer them for you.
So those were the pre-submitted questions. Are there any questions for the upper elementary school? Mr. Schneider.
So just to so police one's the one that I asked. And I noticed this year you put in a specific notation that you're increasing the amount because on election days you wanted to have extra to handle the moving of the kids. So I wanted to clarify that. Now this is a comment, really, at the end of the day, the taxpayer pays this amount of money. But because we are accommodating the moderator's request to be able to have the voting through the secure entrance, I'd like to make sure that the town, that this sort of police need that we have is something that the town recognizes that needs to be done as part of the election. I mean, it's
So I think from an agenda standpoint, we haven't yet heard from the group that the joint meeting of the council and the school board tasked to look at election day, of which the superintendent and Ms. McGill sit. And so I think there's probably details of that are baked into this, but I'd turn to the superintendent who led that effort.
And we will be having the whole group come forward, probably, I would say, in February as it plays itself out, so that you'll hear from everyone. In the short term, I will just tell you, for April, we as a collective have made a determination that we would like to stay at James Master Call Upper Elementary School after we've done all of our work, but we'll go in much more depth. And so to that end, each entity gave thought to what it might do to make a contribution towards a successful completion of this goal. And so as Marcia worked with us in planning the budget, we determined that we would put that in, although Chief Doyle was very responsive about providing what was necessary. I think we want internal coverage as well as external coverage. So I think it looks like a collaborative, Andy, and I think as we looked at it together, we looked at it as collaborative, but we don't control the town's budget. And so to that end, we decided we would put it in to be a holder because, in the near future, and then perhaps a little bit longer, we want to be working on this collaboratively. So we did it as a reinforcement, but you are going to hear Chief Doyle talk in terms of what he's prepared to do.
Yeah, I mean, things are sort of ordered in a wrong order because we reviewing the budget see that without knowing the status of where we are with that process that we came through with the joint meeting. So not knowing anything, Andy, little, radar ears come up and say, I don't want to just out of course or out of matter of course, just say that we want to increase the police presence because we feel it's important for the safety of our kids during it. I want to make sure that's part. So, if I spoke out of line or in improper order, it's just because I don't know the status of where we're at with this.
Right, and I will just say, again, scheduling-wise, we had that initially scheduled to be at the last board meeting, and then we brought the traffic survey before you because that was a more critical need at the time because of timing. The more important thing is that when all of us were together, all of us were of a similar mind. So the fact of the matter is if we have it there, to be held there because we think it's terribly important, and then Chief Doyle and the town decide to say, no, we'll cover that, then that minimum amount, let's say, would be returned to the taxpayer. I mean, we just wouldn't use it, but for this discussion and for this presentation, we needed to hold it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's probably the smallest amount in the budget we're going to talk about, but it's the purpose for it. The other question, can I ask? Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make
You
sure.
have the floor.
Fair enough. The questions about the science equipment. Actually, it wasn't about the repair, but you had 2 procurement of new microscopes to bring the total up to 46. But then you had 2 replacements. So this is to keep the total at 46, to bring 2 new ones in and replace 2 that can't be repaired anymore?
We're trying to build to 54 so that we have, 2 labs that have 26 each in them, 27 each in them. And so what we've been doing is we've been purchasing new to get our numbers up, but we've also been replacing. We need a 40 power microscope. We have some old 20s and we have some old non-electrical microscopes. So what we've been trying to do is replace old ones to get the power that we need while buying additionally so that we can have enough to supply 2 labs.
So because you're sort of upgrading the ones that you are replacing with the higher power, do those old microscopes get used either in your school or in other schools in the district, or are they out of service at this point? Or
at this time, they'd be being used because we don't have enough
Right.
to use them. But after that, they'd be available for, say, if one of the 40 powers needed to be repaired, they could still have something that they'd be able to use. But yes, they would be available if another school would want to use them.
Yeah, that's because you see these in the different schools, you see different equipment coming through. So if you're upgrading to a point, and then it would still have use somewhere else, that's good to know.
Exactly.
And the final question I had was, one of the things is around cafeteria table replacement. Is there like a methodology, like 2 tables every year or whatever? What's sort of the strategy for the cafeteria?
That is the strategy that we're using. As you could see in the budget, there were 2 of them that were in there. We're trying to go to a table that, was easy to put up, easy to put down, safe, easy for children to get in and out of and sit on. So we have a plan in the budget right now to start replacing them 2 a year, and it will take us multiple years.
I was going to say this is like
get
the
that
long
done.
thing, because usually when you if Tom were sitting there, we would ask, is this a replacement because they're broken and not safe anymore? Is this a replacement because you're trying to go to a new style, and sort of what's the cadence? So
We have some that are very old. Again, Andy, I taught at the middle school prior to being the principal of the upper elementary, and those cafeteria tables, some of them were there when I taught back there in the 80s or 90s, and they still work, but some of them don't work as well, or they're more difficult to pack up or to put down, and so we'll take the oldest ones, put them out of commission, and put the new ones in.
okay, good, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions, upper elementary school? Apparently asked and answered. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that will take us to item number 7, formal hearing on the special services budget for 2015-2016. I'll invite back to the table Director of Special Services, Mr. John Fabrizio. Welcome back.
I come with a few books. Sorry about that. Thank you for another opportunity tonight to present Special Services proposed budget for 15-16. This budget's different from some of the other budgets in the other departments, and because it's based on a lot of federal laws and regulations and teams that meet and things that kind of happen globally in the district and behind the scenes, and the end result becomes the proposed budget, and a lot of this is projection. I'll begin the presentation with kind of an overview of a couple laws that I think are important that will, I hope, answer some of the questions I received from board members. I'm going to go back to a law base to sort of why, and there's some why questions I had. And then I'll overview kind of the budget and new things in the budget. And then I'll get to kind of the two multiple questions I had were around out-of-district placements and around the additional expansion of preschool over to Thornton's Ferry Elementary. And I'll try to answer those in those pieces. So feel free if you have questions, I will certainly entertain them. As I begin, I think that it's important to talk about 2 regulations. One is free and appropriate education, which is FAPE, and the other one is least restrictive environment, which is LRE. So I'll refer to both in their acronyms. Free and appropriate education is the right that must be made available to all eligible students with disabilities. They have to be provided at public expense, provided in conformity with the IEP, meet all state standards, include students with disabilities who have been suspended or expelled, It's what's appropriate must be decided by a team and a team of people on a case-by-case basis. Fate must be determined by the educators, the parents, and or the adult students that are involved. And then where fate has to be provided is in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. And what LRE is that we have a requirement to the maximum extent appropriate. Children with disabilities must be included with children in public and private institutions and facilities with students who are not disabled. That's our requirement. They have to be put forward in special classes, separate schoolings, or removing any children with disability from educational environment only occurs when the nature and the severity of their disability is such that they cannot be educated in a regular class or with any supplemental aids or anything we can't put into those classrooms. That's the only time at that point you can remove a child from a class. We have a requirement to try the regular education classroom first. It's our federal and state law that we need to do that. Each public agency must ensure that continuum of alternative placements within their buildings is available. So resource rooms, private rooms, specialty areas such as programs for students with emotional disabilities or autism or other disabilities. We have to provide those separate things. That's our requirement by the laws under least restrictive environment. Then, if an IEP team decides a child cannot be educated in a regular classroom, even with supplementary aid services, they must consider other options. Specialized classes outside their school, specialty schools, home instruction, instruction with hospitals or other institutions. And then the school is required to make these appropriate options available and based on the child's individual needs and provide all supplemental services within those services for those children. So that's basically what FAPE and LRE is. Any questions about those two regulations before I continue?
No.
Thank you. So overall, projected number of students identified with disability has been in a steady decrease. So I'm pretty happy about that we've done a lot of work around response to intervention and some of the things I've come and talked about. And steadily, we're seeing from 2013, I presented we were 685 students. Last year, we were 680 students. And right now, currently, as I look today, we're about 667 students. So it's gradually going. We're seeing some of those benefits, some of the work that our educators are doing. And that's good. So as we look through the budget, please keep in mind I'm projecting a little bit to the future and what may happen in all these meetings and what may happen when we have groups of parents and students and educators get together. If a student moves out of our district that we currently have enrolled in us, the good news is we do not have to support that student's cost anymore. The bad news is if students move in within the next year that aren't included in this budget, we need to support those costs. So it's kind of with both of us. So overall, the budget that I present before you has a 2.1% increase. The reasoning for this is a few items. One is a 3% increase in our busing contract with provider, and that's included in all there's multiple line items for buses. So with each one of those, there's a 3% increase. Charter schools. We've added this year with the help of Mr. Chevenel and Marge and Mark, we've looked at and said there is an actual cost to students we have in charter schools that we have been encumbering within our budget. And we felt that it's important that we pulled those out and actually looked at kind of a trend over the last couple of years of what we've paid, come up with a figure and tried to project out what that figure would be next year in those items, in those line items. And those line items are with paraeducator support, with services support, and with busing support. So that comes off of the current public law 194B, which is the charter school law. That requires students attending charter schools to receive IEP services from the responsible district at its cost. We are the responsible district for students who go to charter schools within Merrimack. So that means that if we had a child within our school that had a paraeducator, a bus, and speech and OT services, currently this year and next year the parent made a determination to enroll them in a charter school, those same services would stay in place. So that's what that law means. So I've projected with basically based on this year's projection and last year's projection, it's about 3 students that we have that we are looking at for next year. Based on those costs is where I came up with those figures. And one of the questions I received was how many students are we talking about? What's that figure around? It's based on that. So again, if students had busing, paraeducators, speech services, OT services, school psych services, counseling services, any of those services they currently had in our district. The IEP currently moves on with them to the charter school. We need to provide those services to them at our cost. So, in the line item for paraeducators, I was asked a question too around the funding, and that's level funded at this point because we are still in the process of negotiations, and when we do that piece, we continue to move those line items over, so that's happened in the line item of paraeducators. I'm also looking for additional equipment funds to continue our multi-year plan. I'm looking at split system air conditioners. These systems will be used again, I talked about this last year, but they'll be used for students who have medical needs that need climate control. And right now we currently use these box portable air conditioners. Not incredibly efficient, take a lot of maintenance and a lot of repair and a lot of maintenance time to physically move them twice a year. It's one of mine and Tom's many conversations about moving air conditioners. We also require, I'm also in the budget this year looking for a slight increase in my computer software account. This is to upgrade our automated assessment system for school psychologists. We basically, what's happening is Pearson, some of the larger people who do create all these diagnostic assessments are going to an iPad system and an online system of protocols that measure and score them. And to do that, of course, it's not less expensive, it's more expensive. So to do that piece, to move to that automated system, I'm requiring a little more money in that account for that to happen, and I'm asking for that. And then, before I move on to the other two pieces, one more question I was asked was around memberships. And the membership question I was asked about was, please explain in my 06 account, 100-2329-4188-1006. That's the account for special ed memberships. Explain what these are for. These are memberships as part of our administrative contract that we belong to national and state associations. So I'm the one person in that account, and I belong to the National Council for Exceptional Children, the local Council for Exceptional Children, and CASE, which is the Council for Administration of Special Education. And I belong to those local and national conferences. I've also been asked, any questions at all so far on any of those pieces?
I see none.
Okay. I've also been asked by 3 separate more board members to talk about my out-of-district placements. So I'm going to be something I shouldn't do is have a handout before I start speaking, but I'm going to do that because I think it's important. So, good news again. Projection for last year was 43 students in our out-of-district budget. This year, we're projecting 40. However, with the good news also comes the other side of the news that we're also projecting a little over a 1% increase in this total, all of the accounts that have to do with out-of-district placements in both the elementary, the middle, and the high school accounts. And those are for accounts that are within the state in our district placements and outside of our state for our district placements. So with all of those, it comes down to a little over 1.5% increase. However, there's 3 less students that we are sending out of students. In our elementary out of district placement, we are projecting to contract with some outside agencies to work with these students in and outside of our schools. This is a way for us to work with these multi-disabled students to try to keep them within our midst and not put them in separate facilities. Working with these agencies hope to avoid avoid outside placement in outside residential placements or long-term placements, which cost probably twice as much. And we're trying to do some different things, and it's better for our children and our family. And going back to my original statement where I started with FAPE and LRE, it better meets the needs of both FAPE and LRE. So then the board also asked, the board asked, a couple of you asked a question around the movement. And you look at many of the counts, like for example, the elementary count had a pretty significant decrease because of our middle and our high school increase. So what happened was, I also hand this into your chart, with our 20 counts, our 10, 20, and 30s, which is elementary, middle, and high, kids got older, and it's just simple as that. And what happens in that fluctuation is, as they move levels, the money moves with them in those levels. They're not. There's newer students. It's pretty consistent. We have a few new students that came in. We have a few students who've graduated and turned 21, and moved on to careers. So that's been happening too. So within that, it's sort of a fluctuation of what happens within that. And again, that happens year to year. It just happens we have a year with a pretty big curve of a few of our kids that are just getting older and happening. Chairman Ortega asked me to speak a little bit about kind of the balance we're trying to keep between students in district and out of district. And I want to just address a kind of I guess I would call it a misnomer that sometimes we may think and perceive that it's more expensive to outplace a kid. Well, yes, it is in a residential facility. However, in a day facility, not always is the case. It's not always done about money or financial costs, and it's not the case always. The case is always made by the team to look at LRE and FAPE and doing that and what's best for that child. Have we exhausted our means within our school district? Have we provided all the things we can bring in to, first of all, keep that kid in the classroom, then keep the kid in the classroom with support, then keep that student in the school within the separatized program, then what supports can we bring in that keeps them within and out of the school, and then finally we look to placement. Have we exhausted all those means? So in those means of bringing in those multiple agencies and people in, there is a cost and expense to this. We are talking about specialists around our area. We're talking about clinical psychologists, or we're talking about applied behavior support and a behavior analysis. All those things that happen in consultants, those are a financial cost. So that's a piece. And the next piece I want to address too is that this is where the power of our coordinators come in our structure we have in the district, having a coordinator every building, a preschool coordinator, and Sherry Goldberg is our district coordinator, and myself. We constantly consult about these cases. When we see a child and means aren't working, and we're constantly collecting data on what's working and not working with children, we talk about those things. We have conversation. We discuss them openly in private in conversations to talk about what are the needs of this child and what other services in our area are available to them. And when we've exhausted all those needs, then Sherry gets really involved, and we start looking at other districts and placements. Not all children, because of their disability, can be educated within the walls of a classroom. So it's another misnomer that every kid can be within a classroom. No, sometimes their disabilities, based on FAPE and LRE, bring us beyond our walls. And that's why we have these facilities outside of us. And that's what happens. So, is there any questions around our district placement more that I can answer?
Thank you for explaining that. Are there any questions at this point? Mr. Schneider.
No, it's not a question as much as a comment. I poked some of the questions to John about the fluidity, can't even talk, of moving of kids across grades, and summarizing it in the different fashion that he did shows that the overall total is pretty close to the same, but you can see the movement of kids. You get kids moving to schools. It's pretty consistent in and out of district from what it was. Some kids moving out. It's hard to tell at 30,000 feet, did everybody leave and graduate, or did you have a whole bunch new come in? So the clarity that you provided there really helped to show the continuity and stuff. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So the next piece is preschool. And so first of all, I'm going to start with a little history. Preschool has been in Merrimack for over 20 years. And I think that some of the questions I received and some of the comments were, I didn't know we had a preschool. Well, we have. And it started, I think, with a partnership with both Ceresc Kids Inc., and Toll House. So it existed for probably many years within our walls, out of our walls, within our walls again, then out of our walls again. And then finally, I think finally around 2006, it found its home over at Reeds Ferry Elementary School. And they welcomed it in, and that was in the direction of Frank Hoyle when he was here, and I was part of that team when we started talking about that, and I think that that really got them to solidify. Then in about 2010, we were fortunate enough to have some ERA funds come in, and I worked with David St. Jean, and I happened to be in the role at Mastercola at that time, and we brought preschool over to Mastercola also. So in existence, it's grown a little bit, but it's varied. It's grown to a point where it was 2 in each classroom, 2 in each building, and now it's a point where there's 2 full-time classroom teachers over at Reeds Ferry, and there's 2.5 at MES today as we speak right now. And this year we have a vision of providing it in all 3 elementary schools and moving it over to Thornton's Ferry. Best practice in education is to provide the service at early age. It's what we have. There's a lot of research out there. The more exposure to literature and the more exposure to language for kids and the more exposure to knowing how to do school really helps them progress in school, both disabled and non-disabled peers. It helps us prepare them for their full-time school day. They know where the nurse is. They know where the office is. They know how to get out of the car and get in the car. They know, they introduce to the right key people, the counselors in the building, the right key people in the building. It adapts them more readily for school to get them in earlier. So this year we have about 105 students in our program. Next year we'll move to about 120 students is where we'll be projectively if we expand to all 3 buildings. And not all of that is students of special ed need. It is we will open up with the expansion to more families to be able to tuition in, and that's a question. So there's some state regulations, as always, in my role. As you know, I talk often about these, and it's Education Law 113.10, if anyone wants to know. And it talks about early education, special education. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and this will answer some of the questions that were proposed. An early education, special education program shall consist of special education programs where it includes less than 50% of the children without disabilities. So what it means is basically 60% of the kids have to be non-disabled in the program, is what it's saying. So less than 50. All right. So there's minimum teacher ratio in early child special education programs. It should be 1 qualified teacher for every 8 preschool students. 1 qualified teacher and 1 paraprofessional for every 8 to 12 students within the thing. The maximum number of preschool in an early elementary special program should be no greater than 12. Now, also that same, 113.09 talks about equipment and materials. And each LEA, which is our school, shall provide appropriate instructional equipment and materials adequate to implement the IEPs for each child with disability as required by law. So this suggests, this law, that we need age-appropriate material for a 3-year-old. It's very different than the size of what a 2nd grader, 3rd grader, they would need. It is a very different size and much more durable for those children, much more structured. When you sit on a preschool chair, which I've had many meetings doing, they're much more sturdier and a wider base than they are the 4th grade chair. So I think, for example, I have to give you an example, a 6, an 8, and a 10-inch chair in preschool and a 12-inch chair will be used for kindergarten. So there's a definite difference there. So you can't take a kindergarten chair for a 5-year-old and put it with a 3-year-old. It's just the legs are going to swim, and they're not going to be able to touch the ground on this. So the cost of the program. The cost of tuition ranges from $1,300 to $1,700 based on the days utilized. So, for example, if they're in a 2 or 4 day program, based on the tuition of how many days there are there. We also have a process with the financial piece. If someone has financial need and difficulties, we have a process in place for these. These funds are collected per school, and they're turned over to the business administrator, Mr. Chevanel. These funds are then shown as income and deposited into the general fund. So I was also asked a question around what's it cost approximately to educate a student with disabilities in the preschool program, and it's about $13,600 a year to educate a child who's disabled in one of our school programs. Some of these funds are re-encumbered through the 8.5 million state adequacy funds that we get. The Merrimack School receives about 1.2 million of those 8.5 are funds for special education costs. And also in the world of special ed, if we have a student that exceeds 3 times the state average rate, we're allowed to apply for catastrophic aid, which we do each year through my office. I was also asked about what would the impact be if we delayed the implementation past 15-16 for the school year. Again, this is, I call this a vision when I started. It is a vision. It's something that we have that we want to better meet the needs of our students under LAE and FAPE, and one of those requirements I talked about was closest to home with the students of their peers. Those are their neighborhood kids. That is one of the reasons guiding behind this. My second reason, it's very good for kids. We will have, also what would happen if we did delay it and we didn't go through with it, next year there is going to be some increase in our special ed populations, and as I've stated before in front of the board, and I should reiterate tonight, when the child turns 3 years old, they start school if they have a disability. It can be on June 1st, it can be on September 1st, it can be on March 30th. When they turn 3, that day, by law, they start school. We have to provide programming for them. So what that means is if we move to not put it in this year, that would mean next year, if we did increase numbers, I would have to come back to the board and talk about possibly increasing that 0.5 teacher to a full-time position to meet those needs of those students. That's under our federal laws to meet FAPE and least restrictive environment. So in a nutshell, that's all about preschool. Is there any questions I can answer around preschool?
Hands are up. Vice Chair Barnes.
How will one classroom at Thorntons Ferry accomplish the pre-K to 4 goal, so getting in at pre-K and staying through grade 4? Knowing that, obviously, you talk about the distribution of the district, they'll have the fewest facilities at Thorntons based upon the goal of our budget. So we only have 1 teacher going to Thorntons. We have, what, 3.5? So if you could kind of break out how...
Sure. I'm sorry I didn't address that because that was probably my area not to tell the future plan. So the future plan would be to have, we would take 1 teacher from MES and the paraeducator support from that 1 room in its entirety of equipment and everything else. We would physically move that, uplift it, put it over at Thorntons Ferry. In the budget is also the addition of a 0.5 teacher. They would add a second classroom of 0.5 at Thorntons Ferry, which would give them 1.5 and 2.5 paraeducators. So we give them 1.5 classrooms, which would run multiple days through the week. They're not all Monday through Friday. Some are a 2-day program, some are a 3-day program. So multiple different kids can come through at a time. Now, that would be the same exact setup as MES. MES would also now, with the removal of 1, have 1.5 preschool classrooms. Then over at Reed's Ferry, we house, we have 1.5 preschool classrooms plus an additional, it's 2 full-time teachers, but one of them works with our multi-disabled population. So 1 section of her week is with kids who are multi-disabled in more of a resource type setting. We have to provide that again based on FAPE. So it comes out that there's really 1.5 full-time programming in all 3 schools, which is an equal balance across the district, with an addition of that specialized program over at Reed's Ferry.
Okay, well, you opened up a can of worms with my next question then.
Sure.
With the Reed's Ferry having a multi-disabled resource there, would the multi-disabled student then transfer to whatever neighborhood district elementary school for grades K through 4?
Depending on the team's decision, LRE and FAPE.
You love those acronyms. So at the end of the day, what you're telling me is if we do pre-K at Thorntons, every child that's in the pre-K system there will be pre-K through 4 in Thorntons, and then same with Master Cole Elementary and same with Reed's.
The hope is that the majority, and just like we do now, not the majority of all of our elementary kids, we still have kids across the district that have needing specialized program. We have specialized programs at 3 of our elementary schools. 1 program we have for students who may have severe medical needs, 1's for kids who may have multiple disabled programs, and 1's for kids who have emotionally handicapped programs. And we have those specialized trained people in 1 in each of our 3 elementary schools as we exist. So we do currently today have some kids who transfer over to schools based on the team decision of FAPE and LRE, that's the best way to meet their needs within our district. We're required to do that. So that's currently happening. Our goal is for as many kids to stay in a neighborhood school as possible and do that. So the answer to your question is kind of yes, based on the team decision, it is to have the majority of our kids stay in their home schools from preschool all the way through 4th grade.
And I guess it segues to the non-special education students. Are they also, will we have a situation knowing they don't have additional need? Well, is it a supply and demand for slots at that point? And so you will have a kid from Reed's maybe going to Mastrocola because there's an open slot at Mastrocola but not at Reed's.
Possibly. That's a possibility, yeah.
So-
But I would say the distant possibility, we typically have a pretty large enrollment and have a waiting list most years, that I think that we have enough kids typically from the neighborhood area to fill those slots
Okay.
in those things.
That's my question about preschool.
Thank you. Good questions. Mr. Snyder.
So a couple clarifying questions on what you handed out, just to make sure I understood. So when you talked about the ed 11, 13, 10 class size and range and the sort of definition, it says an early childhood special education program shall be considered a special education program when it includes less than 50% of children without disabilities. So that means, I think you said it backwards. If it means you have to have 60% of the population with disabilities, not without.
No. You can have more than 50% of kids in the classroom with disabilities, is what it's saying. So basically, if I have 10 kids,
Right.
6 of them need to be non-disabled, based on the law.
Okay. It's not. I read
It doesn't,
different.
it's written
Reads
backwards,
differently.
but yes, that is the point I'm trying to
Is it
clarify.
like
It's
double,
60.
triple negatives almost.
Yeah,
in this
it
thing?
is, it is.
Okay, because I guess the question that it has its roots in when you build a class and you go and you advertise for openings, for non-disabled students to create the blend. I'm assuming that it has to be based on how many special ed kids you've got to determine how many that you can bring in that are not. So it could be variable each year depending on who your population is. Okay,
And that's a difficulty in projecting
right,
who's turning 3
right.
this
Right,
year
right.
who might be disabled. It's
Right,
a very
exactly.
hard thing to predict and to do that.
And the
piece.
fact that you've got
Right,
people that know right off the bat when they turn 3 that they're part of the program, and other people that have been 3 for a while and all of a sudden find out about the program. So
Right.
it's sort of like,
Right.
once they turn 3, as soon as they're identified and work with you, then they could show up
Right.
at any point.
And Sheila Demers, again, I'll just credit her that she does a wonderful job outreaching, and the neighborhood, all the neighborhood daycares and physicians and things like that.
Sure.
We have wonderful connections with it, do a lot of early work prior to their 3rd birthday, so we're well aware. And I mean, for example, last year we did over 71 referrals last year and 71 assessments of kids who were turning 3 coming into our program. So that tells you that there's a lot of good community outreach in some of those things. And that, again, relates back to the survey about are we getting out there and doing some of those things, and those results are really high for us that we're doing some of those pieces.
Right, absolutely, because I mean, my experience with this goes back 15 years or so, and it was probably one of the best kept secrets for a parent that needed assistance that this even existed. So it's certainly turned around big time. So I congratulate the parents group and you and the district as a whole for living up to the obligation that we've got for kids that are in this that have issues. A couple clarity on, so the cost of tuition for non-special ed kids ranges from $1,300 to $1,700. Is that per year?
Yes.
Depending on the number of days. But that's a per year thing, and that's for a half-day program?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in similar to that, when you talk about the cost for a student identified with a disability, you said the average cost is $13,600. Is that for a half a day or full day?
Full day.
So, ones that are identified with disabilities, are there full day?
Some. Based on LRE and based on the team decision.
Right.
And
So the
district
ones
environment.
that are there half day, because my experience was half day there, half day to normal.
Yeah.
Is the cost of the district half of that? So 13,000 is an average for a full day. For that, it could be higher depending on the needs that they've got and the other assistance.
Yes.
But for somebody that only needs half day, for that it could be less than that 13.
Right. And for a budgetary purpose, it's hard to say.
I know, I
You know,
understand.
so for a budgetary purpose, I have to say 13, I have to use that number because can't project too low. I have to project kind of.
Understood. But
in the middle.
I think the point of that was there's been a lot of questions about pre-K in general. As you saw, like, oh, there's a pre-K program. So I think making it clear what the cost is,
Yeah.
so people understand, is really important to do.
Yeah.
One other, I'm going to defer if there's another question because I lost my train of thought. So.
Okay, Ms. Guagliumi.
And just to reiterate too, that this early intervention, starting early, helps set children up for success later on and save the district money because they're getting earlier intervention and they are able to be successful. Or it tries to set them up for greater success. So I think that's a really important point when it comes to the preschool. As it relates to the tuition costs, for those that are not getting the services, so to speak, that Andy just asked about, does that go up every year? Or what's the methodology? Is it comparable with other preschools in the community? Maybe if you could provide a little more insight as to how we come up with that cost and manage that.
I pause for a second to think about how to. It's an average of basically what we saw around the community. I think it was about a year ago, Matt, that we did this, and we kind of did a cost analysis, looked at what was there, came up with a new payment plan too, and what made more sense. We used to try to do a monthly payment plan, and it was trying to track that within a school with over 100 children in 2 different locations became very difficult. We weren't very good about our billing system and our collection system, things like that. So we came up with kind of a new form of collecting quarterly and doing that piece, and based on that, we came up with that figure, looking at surrounding private schools that would have a similar thing. We tried to stay more reasonable for that. We tried to look at, what was a good, fair thing to cost to try to offset to return some of this money back into the general fund. And that's what it was. That's the figure we came up with. There's no, I think, exact science to it, really. It was based on an average of what we saw in the community.
Yeah, we're trying to look to obviously try and recover our costs, but we realize that that's not possible. So we did surveys, like John said, with Bedford and Amherst and all those other existing districts that had similar programs that you had to infuse with these children per law, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of went along their path, not to be the blip in the marketplace, so to speak.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then another question just regarding the space and the facilities. Is it, obviously it's another classroom. Is there any additional work that needs to be done, and let's say that I'm not seeing in the budget to get that room ready, or is there potentially down the road some competing interests for that space based on if enrollment increases? Are there any risks?
Do you want to go, Superintendent?
Well, I would just say that we have gone together to the site to look at it, and I think you would see in Thornton's Ferry budget, as far as playground development, we know where it's to be put, and getting the land ready to receive the playground equipment is there. But as far as the classrooms and so on, no, we're perfectly put. We wouldn't have to do anything.
Okay, thanks.
All set? Mr. Schneider.
This isn't a question, it's more of a comment that you don't have to answer. You can just nod or whatever. When the question came up about pre-K, there was a lot of debate about whether pre-K existed, why are we doing it? I found it interesting when you look around that in Nashua, I think virtually every elementary school, or the majority of them, have an integrated one of these in place, and the same in a lot of the other districts. So I think that from what my observation is that Merrimack has probably adopted this maybe at a slower rate than some of the other districts have in terms of a integrated public pre-K thing. So where Merrimack is viewed as being ahead of the curve in special ed, in many cases, I think we're a little slow to the game on the pre-K part of it. And we've made a good progress over the last few years. And I think what you're trying to do with this proposal is sort of finish the process so that you've got it spread out. And the challenge for us is whether this is the year that's the right year or not. But I don't think there's any argument from us as to whether it makes sense to have it, because I think it makes logical sense. I think the question, at least for me, is this the right year to do it? And that's why we asked the question about exposure if we didn't do it. You know, what is the potential impact and things like that. So.
Any other questions for special services? I found the conversation interesting, even in terms of state guidelines. I've been so trained to talk about special versus typical, and yet they're using the words disabled and terms that typically we try to avoid when talking about these populations. So even in the general ed code, it's perhaps not as sensitive as we'd like it to be. Thank you, Mr. Fabrizio. Oh, Vice Chair Barnes.
I was waiting. Honestly, it was really a little clarity around an earlier conversation regarding charter school expenditures. And you were talking about increases, but are they, we provide transportation for special education students. We provide paraeducators for special education students and the other support that you also mentioned, which I think ran $50,000 under other. Is it really just a line item reallocation, or is it truly a net increase of those amounts?
It's an increase because we currently, for example, if you have a paraeducator who's shared between 3 students in a classroom, and one of those students sharing it up and moves somewhere else, I can't split that person.
No,
And that's kind of what happens in the situation. If I have a bus going to Reeds Ferry Elementary School, and all of a sudden that child who was on that bus goes somewhere else, I have to get a new bus going there. If I have a speech pathologist at Reed Ferry Elementary School who's providing services there, and now I need it at the same time in a different location in a different town, I need to hire that.
Right. So you
and put
really
that
didn't
there.
have, you still need those same resources at the school where they were their home school.
Right.
So it just, they are truly net incrementals.
And that's the detriment to what it is. The services may not have increased the location and the timing. It's the same problem we kind of we ran into in a few places, and we found this within our own internal mix when we started doing some moving amongst our preschool. And I'll go back to that about how we put it in 2 buildings, and all of a sudden we had 1 speech path, and the prime time to give kids services is from 8 to 12. Well, you can't be here and here at the same time. What do you do? And it's kind of like, but the nice thing is some of those services are related services, so I could just lessen one contract and hire another one. In this case, you can't do it because you need the people in 2 locations, and that's what happened to us.
Okay, that's why I just wanted a little clarity on. That was it. Thank you.
Sure. And I think it's an interest. I'm glad that we're making that change in the ledger, and it relates beyond just special education, because we have the in-town charter schools. We're required as well to provide transportation. If the charter school's in Merrimack and it's a Merrimack student going to that charter school, we have to provide the transportation. The reality is the charter school system is a public system, right? It's a public charter school. And so when people start to compare the costs of public education, meaning SAUs like Merrimack, to charter schools, it's important to factor in all of these costs, right? The special ed student who had a part-time para who was going to school here in Merrimack, who's at a charter school now in Keene, and we have to send a bus, and not that necessarily they'd go to Keene, but it's possible. We would have to send a charter school bus and have a para there, a full-time para, and bear that cost. So I'm glad that we're structuring the books the way that we are in order to isolate these costs. Again, Mr. Fabrizio, thank you again for your second presentation of the night, and we'll move on in the agenda, but thank you very much. And that takes us to item number 8, formal hearing on the technology library media budget for 2015-2016. I'll bring our director for technology, library, and media, Ms. Nancy Rose, to the table. And I will ask you, I must have tripped a few times this evening. I like the focus of the words, but it seems as if we've changed from library media and technology services, and I'm very glad to see technology is leading the way.
Oh, thank you. Well, we did that a couple years ago.
I'm a little slow, as people have noticed.
We
this
snuck
evening.
that in when you were
You know,
sleeping.
there's labels printed, there's all kinds of stuff. It takes a long time. Well, good evening and Happy New Year. And it's freezing outside.
And to you.
I just was going to do a brief introduction and then I'll move into the questions that I received. 2015 and 16 is going to be a year to continue working in collaboration with administrators, educators, and staff to make progress in technology infrastructure, instructional technology, software, and library materials in support of instruction and research. So we'll continue into year 3 of the Technology Capital Improvement Plan, continue to plan ways to enhance instruction, develop problem-solving and critical thinking skills, engage learners, and to try to stay on top of changes to assessment, data management and uses, and technology opportunities. That last one is the hardest, staying on top of it. I received questions that I'll just sort of run through, and I'm just trying to make sure I got it in the right order. The first one I received was from Davis Powell. It was a question on my page 2 about the telephone account, and he asked why it was level funded because it had previously come in under budget. Matt and I have talked about this, keeping this level funded for a few years. We're still deploying the voice over IP system. We're changing carriers, which affects long distance. As we implement the phone system, we're building redundancy, so a site that we're not expecting to cost as much can jump a little because we're putting in that redundancy so that they can fail over to each other. So it's more of a cushion to make sure that we're able to keep moving forward in the best way possible. Andy Schneider asked a question about the library supply budget going up and questioned the cables. I like the way you worded it. This is cables, because we're now putting projectors in more places, we're connecting iPads, Apple TVs, we're connecting old laptops to new projectors and vice versa. There's HDMI to VGA, and I can out-acronym John Fabrizio. It's a lot of that. There's adapters, conditioners, and then the other thing that we have been doing is adding RAM to machines district-wide to try to keep the older machines running. As we do more with software and external equipment, it takes more horsepower to run that. So cables is the bulk of it, but RAM is a huge part of it as well. Andy Schneider asked a question, and also Chris asked a question about the software licensing increase and the consolidation, and if that's reflected anywhere else. It's several different things kind of moving forward. We are moving like the antivirus, anti-spam, that kind of behind-the-scenes software. It's going up, and it had historically been paid for out of central offices. And so we're moving that into my budget. It's also an area where frequently you buy 2, 3, 4 years worth of licensing to get better pricing. So 1 year we may be paying a license cost that we miss another year, but then it leaps. So there's a lot of factors there. We also have the new English program that the high school budget will reflect the texts that go with it. The software component of that is an addition in my budget this year. So I'm sure Ken will discuss that. Let's see. Oh, and the other thing is software costs tend to just go up. Between 1.5% to 3% on average. That's a little galling, but they just do. So. Cinda and Andy both asked questions about additional equipment and kind of what it is and how we're moving forward with that. And one question, I think Cinda was the one that asked about the progress on the overall plan. There isn't really an overall plan for this area. This is the interactive equipment in classrooms for instruction beyond the projector and the computer. that the teacher uses. So this is the Mimeo teach bars. And so I think, Cindy, your question also asked about Mimeo and what that is. Mimeo is a brand, and they produce what they call a teach bar, and it essentially just creates an infrared area so that your projection becomes interactive. But they also make a document camera, and they also make a pad, which is sort of a remote mouse. They have a voting system, but it's all kind of integrated with each other. So that's the Mimeo. And we're finding, the planning for this is really at a building level. So I work with the principals, the librarians, the tech educators, and the classroom teachers to identify what it is that's going to be useful for them to interact with what they're projecting and to make it accessible to students. So there's, like at the upper elementary, they're doing more with iPads and Apple TVs. They're using them as document cameras. There's places where they really only want to use the document camera because there's really a lot of professional development that needs to go into it. If you're not a teacher that really embraces technology, a document camera is a really great way to get started. Kids love it. I've shown them to a lot of different people, and they're just kind of engaging because it's like when you get your first microscope. I was thinking about that when they were talking. So there's a lot of different areas that are covered. It looks different in every classroom, but I did do a little analysis. I don't know if it would be useful, but I just thinking of a document camera as sort of a very base entry. We're at about 40% of classrooms district-wide having a document camera, an iPad, something that makes the instruction interactive. So we're not quite halfway, but we don't really have a plan in place because the focus is really on the projectors, the computer replacement, the servers, the infrastructure. So, but it moves along through the technology budget, the library and technology budget.
Are you open for just a follow-up on that before
Sure.
moving to further questions? Ms. Guglielmi, go ahead.
Yes, it's while we are on the topic. So my question was specifically, like I remember, I think 4 years ago, I had seen a presentation of the Mimeos, and I think there was an objective to get so many of them in each school or in every classroom. But what I'm hearing and what it sounds like to me is that just given time and technology, there's other options that educators can use that are perhaps less expensive and also maybe more user-friendly for those that are a little bit resistant to technology. Am I correct? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know. There wasn't really ever a plan to formally get them in place. The plan was really about the projector installation. And,
Okay.
And so with that, we're at...
that rings a bell. Sorry, it's going back 4 years, so the memory gets a little
the projectors
fuzzy.
are at about 40% district-wide as well.
All right, thanks.
So these are sort of above and beyond, and I haven't included it in the capital improvement because we have to do this piece first.
Okay, thanks. Sorry to
But they
interrupt,
are,
but-
I mean, you have to have a projector for them to work.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it's the core piece. The last question that I had was from Andy, and it was just an overall update on the tech infrastructure, the capital improvement plan. And just very briefly, and I'm kind of going through the order that they're in the budget, we're ongoing in our replacement of servers. We've replaced servers at the upper elementary, the elementary, Thornton's Ferry, the Exchange server, which is a central server. We're working on a backup system, so we got started on that this year. With Wi-Fi, we're at about 80% coverage, but this is tricky because the buildings are difficult to really get coverage. So 80% might be you walk into a classroom and you're great here, but you get into the corners and it gets a little more tricky. I think that some of our teachers are becoming artists in the skill of finding signal. And we've moved that forward quicker than the 5-year plan, I'd say largely out of demand, but also through special ed, professional development, special projects, parent groups. There's just been different ways. And so what's nice is because we have such a collaborative work group, if they say we want more Wi-Fi, they come to me and I say, well, add to our existing network. So they just build into what we currently provide. And the system that we use, they're called Arrow Hives, but you can just buy an AP and it just becomes part of the district-wide network. It's really easy to bring them up. So it's designed for that. Cabling is really just as needed depending on the project and the school that we're working on. So there's not an overall plan. We are starting to do Cat 6 cabling so that we're more prepared for a gigabit connection as opposed to where we're at. We're megabit connections now. The numbers just get very large. Machine replacement, this is just going to be ongoing. However, this year we put 2 carts of laptops in the 3 K-4 schools. So that was 156 computers that were added. So those are being used either in the media rooms, the libraries, or they're going out to classrooms, or they're in I think 2 of the buildings are actually taking them out in small sets to do group work in the rooms. And we've set them up so they can circulate through the libraries and in small groups or by the cart. And then we also were able to purchase some of the staff machine replacements, which is kind of behind the scenes, just upgrading the staff computers because we still have some that are very old, which need RAM. And let's see, the projector installation, as I was saying earlier, we're at about 41%. Voice over IP, we have done the high school, the upper elementary, the 3 administrative buildings, and we're working to try to do Reeds Ferry and Thorntons Ferry early to try to get it in this year to coincide with some of the infrastructure, the switch work that we need to do because we had some issues at Thorntons Ferry. So working with the vendor, we've gotten some special arrangements to just move that forward faster. So we've been very fortunate for that because it kind of coincided with some issues we had. And that's the questions that I had.
Wonderful. Are there any follow-up questions? Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, two questions. One, you talked about the carts of laptops. Are those fully functional laptops? Are they Chromebooks? What's the makeup of what you
They're
did?
HP laptops that are running Windows 8, and they're Windows 8 tablets, so they're touchscreen, but they also have a keyboard. So they're a laptop.
They're like a split system, so they come apart.
No, these are intact, and
They flip.
No, they're just a laptop, but they have the touch screen. They're
Just touchscreen laptop.
They're 11.5 inches. They weigh about 3 pounds, and they've got nothing on the case. So they're really basic. They're easy for a small hand. The keyboard's small, spill-proof and pick-proof. And they're really common in education in the elementary level. And I really picked them for that population. And watching them has been kind of fun. I was doing an observation and watching a teacher who had kids doing coding with laptops that had the touchscreen, and just watching the kid like code away, type, reach up, touch, manipulate, go back, type, and just seamless, where I forget that there's a touchscreen and we'll bump it. So it's just so native to them to have both. And in some cases, they like to have the removable, but for the classroom sets, this is really a more manageable thing.
And you notice it's not familiar to me because I stumbled through the way that they were built. You know, it's not a separatable, because now they have ones that they flip, they rotate, they create tents.
Well, we have a few of the yogas from Lenovo that flip over.
Right.
And then the upper elementaries bought some of the Acers that the screen comes away. And so the kids, for reading, they're really involved in the reading with those. And so they can use the tablet as a reading device,
Right.
but then they can also use it with the keyboard.
Right. Cool. So the other question I had was, is there adequate, so this is going to get into the standardized testing, because you talked a little bit about making sure. Do you believe that there's adequate infrastructure in place for this year for the standardized testing based on what you've seen from the different schools?
I think so. But I think what remains to be seen is how the scheduling of it works and the movement, like how many kids are going to be testing at once. The district connection right now is only 100 megabit for the district. We're kind of working on moving that up every year. Matt and I talk about that. We get E-Ray funding to help with that. That I think is going to be the biggest test, is having multiple sets of kids in multiple sites at a time But the testing window, is the testing window 12 weeks, Mark? So we start in March and go through the end of May. I'm just guessing, and you're nodding. So we have the ability to stretch that out over the time so that we don't have everybody going all at once. But I think it's also going to be a year of learning.
So in other words, we can probably count on some sort of a postmortem afterwards to find out what worked and what didn't. And
Yeah, I'm imagining that would come from Dr. Merrifield. Or
Okay.
I'm sorry, Dr. McLaughlin.
When we initially talked about the concerns, though, I think the concern was not bandwidth, which is what you're saying your primary concern is now. It was workstations
Yeah.
at the time, and now what I'm hearing is that actually we're in a much better spot. That you know, if our biggest concern, and I'm not minimizing it, is
Yeah.
bandwidth, you know, that's not a bad problem.
yeah,
to
no,
have,
I wanted to say where we were. You're right. I didn't hear we don't have enough equipment. I'm hearing now we're worried more about the bandwidth, and we've got to balance it. So
Yeah.
We've been pretty careful to make sure that any equipment we add could be used. So we don't pick it for the test,
right.
but we make sure that it will also serve that purpose as much as possible.
Great. Vice Chair Barnes.
Once we finish with this upgrade of servers in 14 or 15, 16, what will be the age of the oldest server that we have? Because I know we've let things go too far in the past.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. We still have things that are between 8 and 10 years old. So we would be working on getting those out. So I'd say probably still 8 to 9 years old.
Okay.
But
And a couple of weeks ago, the police department came to us with some consultants regarding CopSync. I understand there was continuing software maintenance costs involved with CopSync. Is any of the CopSync 911 expenditure included in your budget?
It's in ours.
No, actually, it's in
District-wide.
the district budget.
Okay. So everything you're seeing is actually just continuation of what we've already done then. That was really wanting to see where that was going to fall into the big picture. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? You've answered all of mine as well. So thank you for staying as late as you have and for the presentation.
well, thank you.
So that takes us now to item number 9 on tonight's agenda, response from Planning Board regarding school district's capital improvement plan for 2015 to 2020. Business Administrator Chevenel.
Thank you very much. We had a meeting, the superintendent and myself, with the planning board on December 16th to present the CIP as proposed by the school board. We had plenty of presentations as far as a PowerPoint goes, as far as pictures of the track, pictures of the roadways and pavement that needs to be replaced, maps and grids and everything. The planning board chose to make 2 changes to our capital improvement plan, which you'll see over there on the second page. They took a look at the MHS track, and even though we showed pictures of the patching and whatnot, felt that we could get by another year on that, and so they moved that into 17-18, where it kind of lines up with the artificial surface. The artificial surface did generate a lot of discussion in light of some of the issues that have been brought to our attention by various sources, and they changed that from necessary to a deferrable. I think the thought in the room was, let's hold off on this a bit until we get more data and information on the long-term effects on artificial surfaces as far as kids' growth, development at a very young age. And I think that was It didn't come out directly that way, but that was kind of the sense that I got. So I think that was the main reason for it. Everything else was approved as is.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Schneider.
So on the track where they chose to move it out to the year where to 17, 18, right? That was their recommendation. Did they pick which one that they would choose? Did you give them both options, or they just said a track in that year?
We had both options up there, the 6-lane and the 8-lane.
Did they have any insight, or they just?
Well, what was presented on the CIP was the 6-lane, because the 8-lane is much more.
Well, but it was also undershot at the 6-lane. We know is actually a higher cost than one.
That is correct.
Right, so.
I want to weigh in because
Yeah.
Matt really did the entire presentation. It was really excellent. And I would tell you from sitting and listening that I think the Planning and Building Committee, or Planning Board, was more about putting the two things together and having it done as a whole project, and not having it split up. They spent more time on the bridging, that kind of thing. So if
Yeah.
you go and do the track, and then you have to go and do the field, then what's going to happen to the track and so on. So they looked at it as an integrated project. And I think they did raise up the notion that in the news recently had been the concerns raised about health. But I saw it as an integrated project. And
That
they
was the
just-
main focus
That's right.
for
And
us,
they just
integrated project.
couldn't
the money.
understand, even with Matt saying it's like you have to have gone through a lot of conversations to really understand why might we be at a time where we'd be looking at two separate projects. In their world, it made sense to put the two together and do it as an integrated whole, so you wouldn't spend, maybe doubly or whatever. Would you not say? That's really what the discussion was.
Yeah, that was the main thrust in talking to them, because they asked me what additional costs we'd incur, and as far as that goes, I didn't really pin them down as far as an exact cost, because we don't have an exact price as far as building a bridge across a track that would hold a dump truck holding 20 tons of crushed stone. That's quite the bridge and the structure. So they saw that kind of as an impediment to the whole project, and it would be much more easier to intake, develop, just complete and plan for it as if it was one specific project.
However, they claim that the field is deferrable, but the track is necessary.
Because the track is necessary.
Right, but if...
And we did talk about... Go ahead, sorry.
No. I'm trying to use logic, maybe this, is that if they want to put the two together, but they say the field's deferrable, but the track's necessary, the track's going to have to come before the field if we defer.
That's true.
So even though they forced it so that it was on top of each other, they recognize that the field may get deferred and we're going to have to do the track anyway. I'm just...
They realize we're going to have to do the track anyway. If we're going to do the field, they would like to see the track done with the field. They're not quite hooked. The hook isn't sunk in them on the field. So therefore, they classified that as deferrable until more information comes in. Because if we maintain our field, the football field, soccer field, lacrosse field, whatever function it performs, as we have been, and I explained to them that we just don't have people spreading Scott's 4-step formula on there. We have certified turf managers who go to school for this. These are our maintenance mechanics, our grounds people. and we use all organic materials. So we're getting the best turf out of that surface. It's just limiting the access, because when you go on there and you go when it's, you know, in full glory, I mean, it's like a carpet that you can just brush up against. It's like a, you know, a real thick 70s shag carpet that's not going anywhere. But over the years, with the, you know, during the course of the year, with the utilization, it does tend to, you know, wear out, especially in the center section. And the only thing you really gain with a the artificial surface is more utilization. But then at the end of 15 years, 20 years, you have to look at replacing that at a huge cost, whereas keeping it as just a surface that is grass as it is now, there's not that big spike every 15 to 20 years. So they were wrestling with that a little bit, to be honest with you.
All set? Vice Chair Barnes.
On that note, not about the planning board discussion, but we do have an opportunity that Eric Sabian doesn't come before us that often, and he's going to be here this week, and as is Ken, obviously, and it's his house as we're talking about. Can we have the opportunity for maybe some side discussion on their position on turf? I think we've talked about maybe it not being the right fit for this district, and just having their initial. I'm not asking for a legally binding position, but you know, kind of where their heads are at regarding turf versus natural grass for that location, and maybe we can start talking more with a better and more clarified vision.
I think that's a great idea, and I think the fact that they are they know in advance that that question will come up is perfectly fine. What do you think?
I think for sure they're coming prepared to speak about the track, because that's what they were asked to do, but I'm sure they both have a feeling, without question, especially Eric, because it's the world in which he operates with all other athletic directors.
Yeah, we've discussed the track in the past. We really haven't had a good, the field in the past, we haven't really had a good in-depth discussion about it. It's kind of like all of a sudden everything is coming together technology-wise. I think everybody can agree on that statement. It's because we finally realized that we needed the technology and we had to put it in the budget, whereas before we were just kind of scraping and trying to hunt and gather and cobble things together to actually keep up or do what we think we were doing in keeping up. Now we know what we need to do to keep up, and we have a plan, thanks to people like, well, thanks to Nancy Rose. Let's put it right on the table right there.
Right.
And sometimes it's better to be the last person at the dance, because a lot of the voice over IP equipment, we could have jumped on that bandwagon around 7 or 8 years ago, and now we'd be looking at replacing it. And now we have a lot of incentives from Cisco that are trying to, scale schools really big time. So we're getting a lot of breaks in prices on that, whereas 10 years ago, 8 years ago, VoIP was kind of the sexy thing that everyone was going to get into, and to save lots of money and everything like that. And, it was fortuitous. It was good timing. Sometimes good, being the early adopter is not necessarily the best thing in the world. So a good discussion on it, and one that's of merit, I think, is really important. Just my 2 bits.
Excellent. Any other questions? I was wondering if you, you explained the desire to link the projects. Was the planning board aware, and were they aware of the reasons why we have the track in 16-17 and have actually considered talking about it, and we'll talk about it for 15-16, actually bringing it back the fact that they actually did the opposite and pushed it out. Can you talk a little bit about any deliberations that took place along those lines?
Well, we tried to implore upon them that this was something that was a need and not a want. There were a lot of visuals to this, showing the lifting, the repairing, the instability of the track. I recall making a statement where you can go and you can find a little hole in the track. You can put your finger in there, and all of a sudden you can lift it up like it's an entire, area rug, and it's not adhered to the asphalt anymore. So that was explained, I think, quite well from my vantage point. Marge was sitting, listening, and I think we hit all of those pretty hard. So that's
What I would
why.
say, though, is at the very end, Matt's presentation went, I think, about an hour. The town was to present after us, and then there were a group of citizens that had concerns on the agenda. So sometimes we're able to see them deliberate and come up with what they're going to do. They pushed the whole thing to the end. We left. So to me, the more important thing would be to go to the end of the session and see them deliberate, because that's where they actually finally decided.
Yeah,
Matt and
because
I left at the end knowing how the feeling had been and the questions that were asked, but not to see them actually deliberate.
In fact, while I was sitting here, I was trying to look up the minutes of the December 16th meeting, but it's not posted yet. Because I wanted to kind of give you an idea, and I was hoping that I could give you an idea of the discussion that ensued, but that was well later on into the evening, and we had since gone because it was a very full agenda.
So the video should be online then,
Yes,
and
correct.
we'll be able to look at it. Okay, thank you. So with that, we will move on to item number 10, proposed cuts to the 2015-2016 school district budget. And I will turn to Superintendent Marge Chaffrey.
Thank you. And before I begin my remarks, I'm going to pass you the proposed cuts. So, to me, it's as important to talk to you about process as it is outcome. To come before you with 3.5 pages of cuts, I want you to know that I worked with 6 principals, 3 directors, Director Rose Fabrizio and Tuso, Matt Chevenel, Linda Hastings, Mark McLaughlin, and myself. And what I will tell you is that all of us have come to a consensus on the tiered cuts before you, as well as the impact statements. So what I want to do tonight is I want to review the tiers of proposed cuts with you, and at the end, I'm going to pose questions for you in preparation for our get-together on Wednesday night, which is the board's budget hearing. First of all, each of you independently was asked by the chair for how much you would like to see put forward for cuts. And it went from $750,000 up to $1.5 million. All of you did not weigh in on the same number, but that was the range. So if you look at the first tier, which amounts to $761,623, it comes from 3 entities. It comes from maintenance, SPED services, and the district. The first being maintenance, which is the HVAC unit, the air conditioning unit at the high school. You remember when Tom was here, I think one of you asked him, of all the projects to be done, really either what would you give up or what's the most important, and he honed in on the roof. The roof is the most important thing to him. And even though we talked in terms of these 2 projects being put together, because one goes on top of the other, if you will, he really feels at this point in time, given where we are, it could be done a year out. He's very defined about that. Also, if you look in the accounts that have to do with electricity, one of you, I think, raised up something about the electrical expense for what was projected for the superintendent's office. And in fact, one of you actually denoted a clerical error, which means instead of it being like $4,325, it should be $3,325. So that's a clerical error. Then you'll see that as far as special services is concerned, you heard John Fabrizio tonight raise up the fact that he's looking at split air conditioning systems for those who have medical needs. And yet, right now, we predominantly operate with mobile systems. And so even though that's our vision, that's our future, that's what we'd like to do, we feel for next year that $20,000 could be put off, and we will continue to use our mobile systems. Then when you come to the district, you'll see that there are two areas. First of all, taking total credit for the projected retirees. What I need you to know is that when we go through and do the retirees, Matt is very good about looking at this. We have a set number of retirees. We know that there are going to be at least 7. When we go through and do this, we look at the top 7. They're all ranked by particular criteria, and I'm going to cover that on Wednesday night, how that's done. What I need you to know, though, is that there were 32 actual requests, and so we know we're going to have 7 at least, and I will tell you we're going to have more because I've already had put in writing that even though I am not eligible, let's say, for the retirement incentive, I, said educator, am still planning on retiring. I'm going to give you the courtesy of the letter to tell you that. So what we've done is we've gone through by individual, and we've looked at the particular position, and if we were to hire it, what would be the difference in cost? And Matt has gone through each of these, and so we figured that the $216,448 is a good number for what we will save. If you look under the contracted services account, which we're also going to talk to you about on Wednesday night, there are 2 lines that we would make adjustment to. One line was $21,175 for an online parent registration system. That also is a vision we have, getting all of our parents away from having to fill out the forms year to year, hard copy. So believe it or not, that's what that costs to do it online. It's our vision. We want it to happen, but not next year. Likewise, our systems manager and Matt have been looking to try and find perhaps a cost savings around our emergency calling system. We have found another vendor who can make an offering that's $3,000 less. So if you look at, again, all of those, that is what we would call our proposed first tier for $761,623. If you go to the second tier, you will see that we have, again, 2 entities making a contribution. The first is maintenance, and the second is really SPED and Thornton's Ferry. I guess it's really 3. We'll put it together. The first is to give up 2 items. It would be for replacement of cabinets at Mastercola Elementary School. If you went in, you'd see that the cabinets are deteriorating because we have the bubbler that's a part of it, and so it's just water leakage over time. We need to do a replacement. Our maintenance department can do that. As well as giving up $8,000 for crack filling and sealing in the parking lots. It would just delay it for 1 year. And then we are proposing that we would take the preschool system, which you've heard about tonight, that we want to move to Thornton's Ferry, and for a year to push it out. You've heard what our vision is, though. That's part of our budget process, is to tell you that we want preschool in all 3 elementaries. But for next year, we would continue to utilize it at Mastercola Elementary and Reed's Ferry. So when you take out the proposed preschool teacher, a half-time, 2 half-time paras, the FICA that goes with it, the playground, the furniture, all of that totals $105,493. If you put those 2 tiers together, you're at $867,116. When you go to Tier 3, you will note that the administration is proposing giving up all furniture, all additional and replacement furniture. And if you look down, you see that every school is represented. And you've heard that they're asking for students' desks, chairs, kidney tables, lab stools, whatever. And I hope what you're seeing as you look at these pages, note that other than the additional preschool teacher and preschool paraeducators, we're not mentioning staff. We're giving up everything else because our whole effort is to preserve our staff. We consider them to be our greatest assets. So again, taking out all furniture and what I would call our enhancements, if you will, additions, add-tos. You will find that in like special ed and the library, giving up periodicals, giving up some books, giving up some computer software for the school psychologist to use. You heard John reference it, going to like an iPad instead of doing pencil paper. We'll do pencil paper for another year. So again, the methodology here is all furniture and enhancements. That totals, that page is $73,022. So if you add that, you're now at a total of $940,138. When you go to the fourth tier, you will see here we now get into replacement equipment. Again, you'll see it in all schools. I'm talking about, for example, music equipment, art equipment. That's where the kiln sits at Reed's Ferry. Calculators, microscopes you heard referenced tonight, a portable keyboard, some athletic equipment, some from supply accounts. So it's either replacement equipment, supply accounts, and at the very bottom, you'll see that is where the maintenance plow truck is. Now, you might think, certainly, why wouldn't you put that in a tier earlier on? It's because we have so much concern about this particular truck. We don't think the one that we've got currently is going to pass inspection. We're very worried about it. And you know Tom well enough to know if he thought he could give up a truck, a plow, he would do it. But he can't. And so in speaking with him and so on, you can see we've put this in the fourth tier. The fourth tier totals $66,801. Here's where we come to the total of $1,006,939 if you add tier to tier to tier. We've gone one step further. And in the fifth tier totals $134,683. And this is where we have given up the computer technician position. And we have given up the new science techs at the middle school and the modules for family and consumer sciences. What I hope you see is that on this page has everything to do with instruction. If we do not get the computer technician position, what is happening is we are having erosion of instruction at the elementary level from the education technology integrators and the librarians. They're having to do so much troubleshooting that they're not able to do what they need to do, which does not seem appropriate. We have one computer technician, and you've just heard Nancy talk about all that we're doing that troubleshoots the entire district. It's just not working anymore. Likewise, you know how we feel about science. We're pushing forward with science, and earth science is going to affect, all of the 8th grade. And then the family consumer equipment, last year we did in entirety the technology education piece, the modules, and likewise we need to be doing this. And when you speak with Debbie on Wednesday night, what she'll tell you is we can't really get into a half state. The modules are the computer as well as the modules themselves. So could it be put off for a year? Of course. It's just as we've talked together as a group, we've chosen to just have it as the last tier. So that then brings you, at this point on page 4, you would get $141,622. So for the range, you remember I said on the far side, it was to be $1,500,000. So remaining to be found is $358,378, which is a lot to find. So here is something that I need to ask you, and it wouldn't be fair to ask you to weigh in tonight because you're just being presented with this. But I do want to come back to you on Wednesday night and ask you this question. Do you really still desire me to go forward to $1.5 million? Because if so, what it means are positions, both professional and staff positions. In this district, we have a way of being, and the way of being is I go out into the field and I see every affected individual. So in some cases, I think it's going to be a minimum of 6 or 7 positions, but it ultimately could affect many more people. Because if you think about it, if you're looking at a position that, let's say, goes K to 12, and let's say at the high school, a person says, the principal says, I want K to 12 position. I'm making up, let's say it's music. Well, remember, if you look at the collective bargaining agreement, the most senior persons could be at the high school. Therefore, it affects someone over here. So first you have to go to the high school and say, we're eliminating a music position here, but the actual affected position is over at Thornton's Ferry, let's say. So that's 2 parties for 1 position. I am very prepared to do it. I have done it every year we've done a reduction in force. But what I don't want to do is do it if the board is not serious about cutting $1.5 million, because I think it creates trauma that just doesn't need to be. And so you can see how we've structured this to preserve the employees that we have in place, because we feel the district is what it is because of them. So I need you to consider that, as well as to consider other areas. We had debate about field trips. Notice we don't have a field trip showing. We decided we would rather give up equipment, furniture, some supplies, than the experience for the child, let's say. And we thought the board would feel the same, but maybe you don't. Maybe you think that should be looked at. So I would just ask, if you want us to go beyond 1.14, that you tell us such, and we're very prepared to do that. And we so appreciate the fact that you've given the opportunity for us to give you a cut list, because we built it, and therefore if we need to take it apart, it is just gratifying to have you do that as compared to picking all over the place. I hope you see how we've gone about this. So I welcome your initial comment or any question you might have.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate the effort that went into this and the logic in how it's being approached. Are there any initial, obviously there'll be time to absorb this and follow up. Are there any initial questions as it relates to the list or comments? I mean, I have one question, and it relates to in Tier 1, the total credit for retirees and accounting for the reduction in cost for incoming teachers as being lower on the pay scale than those leaving. As I look at this, what I see this representing is potentially a change in the way that we budget year over year. Historically, I think what we've done is we've had the implicit understanding that we're going to budget for the positions with whatever necessary increases need to occur based upon current staffing levels, and that when retirees leave and we bring in lower salaried staff as their replacements, that we get some level of savings from that, and then that winds up as surplus in the general fund and gets returned to the taxpayers. And what I see us doing is sharpening our pencils here a little bit more, and perhaps budgeting somewhat less conservatively, a little more precisely, in order to accomplish this. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that is correct. And we, as the superintendent said, we looked at every position, and depending upon the type of position and who we would need to fill it, determine the amount of the reduction. In some cases, we were fairly aggressive. In others, if you're looking at a speech-language pathologist, which is on the critical shortage list, we weren't that aggressive. So it was some thought given to it, but it is kind of a shift in what we're doing in order to reduce year-end surplus.
That's thank you. That was the answer I was looking for. In particular, are we painting ourselves in a corner as it relates to the salary line if in fact we do that? And what it sounds like is that you've, for very specific positions, left things more open, and in others, put a realistic range.
I would say this year too, the HR director was told, and we did at a leadership meeting, we set a cap, if you will, for a classroom teacher. And if you were to go over that cap because you needed experience at a particular grade level or whatever, you had to come and see me. So it just kind of took care of itself, if you will, and that's been exceedingly helpful.
Great. Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. Schneider, excuse me.
So, as far as the list is concerned, I don't have a specific question on the list, although I will be prepared to give you input on Wednesday as you requested. But I actually have a question, and it sort of gets to what Chris talked about, is that whenever we sharpen our pencil and be maybe a little less conservative on something like this, it means that our budget is more accurate, but what it also means is you lose that potentiality for returning funds at the end that was not spent. Right, and the part of the issue is that within the district, I'm not blaming the district, I'm saying the reality is that we have a budgeted amount to run the district, and then every year there's some level of return, for, either excess, revenues or things that we didn't spend. We're coming off a year where we had a $68 million budget, but had a very significant return because of several factors. And I know that there's been some confusion out in the taxpayer base around the difference between what the net amount of the budget amount that we came through versus what our budget amount is this time before we start, which is a lot bigger than what reality was in terms of what our budget, because the budgeted amounts aren't nearly as far apart as what's being painted. Do we have any idea or stake in the ground that we can put into our conversations around what we anticipate for things that we could see as being brought to the district? Not in terms of revenues, but things like the LGC return that we got that was much bigger than anticipated. I know that we've talked in the past about what we think might be occurring. Do we have any just statements that we can make around, as we head into this next year, what we think that net might be?
Yeah, the LGC return that added to the $4.5 million surplus, that was done and bequeathed upon us after the tax rate was set. We had no way of knowing that was coming, so we couldn't have estimated for it. So that was a large chunk that added to the surplus that was just unanticipated revenue, absolutely unanticipated.
Right.
Can we count on that coming into?
Don't get me started. I'm not saying count on it. You can't count on anything.
Not saying it, yeah.
But if we for example, there's some level of LGC that's coming. I mean, the problem is right now, the reality is that our budgeted amount, if we just assume that we get our typical amount of return at the end was like 1 to 1.5 million, sometimes a tuck under $1 million. It was nowhere near what we did this past year. So I don't want, unless we know that there's some anomaly around LGC coming again, I want everybody to understand that we're working from an actual budgeted amount. Because if you go back a year, the return was not 4.x million, so we probably actually
It was around
had a higher rate.
$2 million.
Right, so it was probably a higher rate, or almost equal, the previous years, even though it was high. I guess what I'm trying to do is make sure we put a dose of reality into our discussion, so we're not basing it off of post-return budgeted amounts or things like that.
Yeah, the year before was around $2 million even. There was some on the revenue side, some on the appropriation side. The thing is with items, when you're looking at revenues, we have a range from Department of Revenue Administration. Right now my range is anywhere from, and you heard John, the law is anything over 3 times the state average, you get reimbursed. That's
But not
the law.
necessarily every dollar you
That's the law.
Right.
In reality, what the state does, and is they say, they look at their bank account and they say, we can only fund this at 70%.
Right.
And that's what you get. So right now, for this current budget year, I have a range. I could either collect 600,000, or I could collect at a top end 800,000 to 900,000. Do I feel confident at 900,000? Absolutely not.
Right.
Have we been encouraged to go for the lower end in our discussions with the New Hampshire School Administration Association, Dr. Mark Joyce, who has been around forever and is one of the most knowledgeable people that I know about what's going on in the dark cobweb corners of Concord. And that's the way we've usually played it. We can be a little bit more aggressive if that's what we want to do, but there's always the chance. But, it's something that you have to take with some thought and some careful discussion before going that road.
Actually, just to be clear, having gone through this budget for, on the budget committee and then in the school board, all of those things that are normal line items, I know they're variable and you never plan for that budget perspective. What I'm talking about explicitly, are there any windfalls that you anticipate, such as the LGC, that are not on our normal radar screen happening in this budget year?
Well, we received another $1 million worth of LGC money this year, which we've taken in as unanticipated revenue because it wasn't known to us beforehand that it was going to happen again. To look at that and to think that that's going to happen 3 years in a row, I would probably say the chances are very poor that that's going to happen. I think the $360 million surplus that they did have has been whittled down to an adequate amount that everybody in Concord can live with and let them operate with sufficient resources just in case. Worst case scenarios do happen. I believe they're now in the situation where they've changed their ideology, where they're back to buying stop-loss insurance instead of using their own fund balance to fund the high claims. Stop losses, anything over $200,000, they're not liable for. It goes to a third-party insurance carrier, and it costs you maybe $5 million a year to get it. But it's worth it in case you have those awful claims. So I think they've gone back to that kind of ideology. So I would be very surprised if for year 3 we would get another $1 million coming our way.
I think, we can call. I just don't think we're going to get an answer. No, but it's almost out of our control. And so I think to plan on it is not good. To plan on the same kind of amount that we've just gotten, I don't think we should do that either. They're trying to settle off, if you will, and get back to normalcy, because even though we can say, well, it's been a nice surprise, the fact of the matter is, for the amount of effort that's been expended to make the payments that we've needed to make to employees and so on, it's taken a tremendous amount of time and effort. So, between now and Wednesday, Andy, we can make a call to the people we know there. I just don't think that we're going to get an answer. And I think probably what they'd say is, you need to ask the board chairman, or you need to, Peter Bragdon oversees the entity. I just don't think we're going to get an answer that will hold weight. Let's put it that way.
So while it would be interesting to get that information and get anecdotal at best information back, the reason I'm asking this question is I want to make sure that when we get into the budget discussion and we look at the cuts and all that, that we're really working off of what the budget was last year and the budget we're talking about this year, rather than what the net amount was on taxes paid. Because to me, for us to artificially cut to get below a budget level last year or some other thing like that, to me it's not fair to the district. And while the taxpayers will see a bigger impact because of the way the numbers worked out, we still have a district to run, and we have to do it in a responsible way. So for me, I wanted to have this conversation just to bring these discussion points out, but also make sure that we're really talking about budgeting last year's budgeted amount versus this year's budgeted amount, rather than what the net was at the end of what was returned.
Yeah.
That's all.
So along those lines, it might be helpful. I appreciate the statement, and I think you also, to summarize what you said, I think there was a key point in there as well, which is that the amounts that we historically return for surplus, because of the way that we conservatively estimate those revenues, are relatively tight, and that unlike a town entity, we don't retain surplus, right, for overages. So if we actually go over budget, right, we're in trouble, right? There's emergency meetings and everything else that need to be set up in order to appropriate funds. And so I think that was a great point. Along those lines, I was wondering if it's possible, I've been doing back of the envelope sort of calculations here for, relative impact of the various tiers and where this gets us in terms of if we were to make these reductions, if I look at tier 1, roughly a 1% reduction in
where we are right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, we could spell that out for you.
that would be
I'll wait till Wednesday to figure it out exactly.
okay. Great.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful to
I
us
can
as
email
well.
everybody so they can have it in advance.
Yep, I think
Okay.
that would be very helpful. Any other questions on the tiered list, Mr. Schneider?
My only comment is that some of these items that are on this list, we will not have been able to discuss until the next meeting on Wednesday, around like the high school budget and some of the things that are here. Because there are a couple of things that weren't on this list that I would have expected to be, and a couple of things on this list that I didn't expect. So I'm hoping that you ask us the questions about the additional cuts and stuff after we've had a chance to talk to the other departments before we have that conversation.
Right, no, I'm expecting it at the end of the evening. It's just that if there were to be people involved, I have Thursday, Friday, and Monday,
No.
because it must be done before we convene on Monday night. So it's simply, I would love to wait later, but I'm just in a time.
Right, no, I
crunch.
agree. Just
But
want to make
no,
sure
at the end
the
of the
order of
evening.
things happening on
Mhm.
Wednesday night.
No, at the end of the evening.
Okay, thanks.
All set? Vice Chair Barnes?
I know that you had mentioned that the range for cuts went from 750 to 1.5 million, and I'll take ownership of the 1.5 million right now. Honestly, my goal is to not impact staffing if staffing educates children. So if the board would not mind jumping the gun on this, since it was my position I put you in, I would like to withdraw and keep it at the 1.1 and pick it from there, if it's okay with the rest of the board.
I mean, we have till Wednesday, but I've got no issues. Go ahead.
Well, for me, I was sort of in that vein, similar. I expressed statements earlier that cutting staffing to achieve a budget when it impacts the education is something that I didn't want to do. Are there other areas where we might be able to cut a few more things out to get it a little bit more? That's fine. But I would support sort of Shanna's position on this.
Yeah.
And I would support it as well.
Okay. So it would appear at this point that the board has enough to work with, and that there's not a need to come up with an additional list. Thank you, Shannon. All right, moving on. Item number 11, board members' response to the New Hampshire School Board resolutions. At our December 15th meeting, we distributed the proposed resolutions for the 2015 New Hampshire School Boards Association Delegate Assembly, which is happening this Saturday, January 10th, in Concord. Our delegate to the assembly is Vice Chair Barnes, and we were asked all to review the proposed resolutions and come to the meeting prepared if we wanted our delegate, Ms. Barnes, to vote differently than the recommendation of the New Hampshire School Boards Association Board of Directors. Just so everyone understands, school boards are able, school boards, are able to submit resolutions, and they are sent to us in a packet which has the proposed resolution, a stated rationale, a description of the current situation by the New Hampshire School Boards Association, an impact, and a review and analysis, and either a recommendation to adopt, not adopt, or perhaps some modified proposal. And so what we discussed at our last meeting was anybody who had an exception to the New Hampshire School Boards Association Board of Directors recommended action, that we would deal with it on an exception basis to raise those proposals, and then the board would take action, and the outcome of our vote would then be the way that our delegate, Ms. Barnes, would act for us on Saturday. So were there any exceptions to the proposed actions? Okay. Seeing none, we will close that item. We'll move to other correspondence. Late last week, Budget Committee Chairman Heinrich, myself, I think Vice Chair Barnes, you were copied on the note, as well as administration, received a note from a resident asking for the school website to be updated with the budget review schedules, as well as deadlines, etc., to be updated on the website. We have accomplished some of that request. There's a formatting request for how that information be put out, very similar to the town, that requires some coordination between the Budget Committee Chair, myself, and the district in order to get that out, but we'll get that out as soon as possible. All of our meetings, however, are posted with agendas. Additionally, on December 22nd, we received a note. I received a note which I forwarded to the board from Chris Christensen, from the trustees of the trust, and I'll just read it really quickly. Dear Chairman Ortega, the Watkins Forest consists of 2 parcels of land, one accessed from Profile Drive and one north of Lawrence Road. The land accessed from Profile Drive essentially lies between Mitchell Street and Bean Road. It abuts the Mitchell Woods, owned by the town. Previous logging has used the Mitchell Woods for access and a landing area. The logging is done on behalf of the trusts, and the revenues are then deposited to the trusts and used by the board. The Merrimack Village District is planning to drill a well on the Mitchell site and has requested an easement from the trustees for a sanitary protection area, otherwise known as SPA, in the Watkins Forest. This will encompass about 6 acres of land on a 61-acre site. and there was an attachment for the plan. Through the Merrimack Town Council, the trustees have worked to protect their rights and those of the schools in granting such an easement. For your information, attached are related documents, council's opinion, the will of Harry Watkins, the proposed easement deed, and the related RSAs and DES rules. We expect there will be a public hearing early in 2015. Is there any other correspondence to come before the board? Seeing none, I'll move to comments. Any comments from the board? Oh, the superintendent.
Could I ask if on Wednesday night you would bring along the two copies that you've gotten of the proposed tracks, because you were given color copies to just help you in seeing, and then we won't have to duplicate that again. That would be helpful, please.
Start saving money now. Okay. Any other comments? Item number 13, new business. Is there any new business to come before the board? Seeing none. Committee reports. Mr. Schneider.
Let's see, on December 22nd, yes, the week of Christmas, the Planning and Building Committee met. They are still working towards providing report information on their the charge that we gave them. They worked all through the meeting and then lost all the edits at the end. So we just got the update. We just got the updated version today that we have to review. We went through several of the properties available for lease and for sale in the area to kind of raise exposure to planning and building, what the different options were there.
Yep.
And they're prepared to, they're actually meeting, it's kind of weird, they're actually meeting on Monday night over the top of our meeting. So to sort of finalize their report and wrap anything up. So I won't be able to attend that. I'll be here, obviously, but I'll provide my input before, and then they're prepared to come here on the Tuesday the 20th to sort of share their results. So
Great. Any other committee reports? Vice Chair Barnes.
On the 23rd, I believe it was PERC, the Program Evaluation Review Committee, where we went over 3 proposed courses. One that's an art with science integration with the glass teacher and the chemistry teacher. A technology that's with a lot of, graphic design and 3D animation, which is kind of a second step to their initial program, so it'll be more of an in-depth program. And then third is a technology in yoga that was also reviewed, which has a PE element to it, but is truly not a PE grade class. So that also was presented and opened for consideration.
Wonderful. All I can picture is We Fit or something like that. No more committee reports. We went from the 22nd to the 23rd, none on Christmas Day? No? Okay. Public comments on agenda items. Is there anyone from the public looking to address the board on? Okay. Seeing none, we will close public comments. We will take a moment to sign the manifest, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Made first by Vice Chair Barnes, seconded by Ms. Guagliumi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. None opposed. The motion carries 4-0-0. Thank you, everyone. Good night.